The conference room at Tesla's headquarters buzzed with the kind of energy Elon Musk thrived on. Intense, almost electric. Yet today, even the usual whirlwind of deadlines and ambitious plans wasn't enough to pull him out of his frustrated days. A critical component of the Mars colonization project had hit a standstill, and weeks of brainstorming had yielded nothing but dead ends. With every delay, the dream of touching another planet seemed to drift further away. Elon rubbed his temples, staring blankly at a holographic blueprint of the failing energy system. His team's voices blurred into the background as his thoughts spiraled. He needed clarity, an answer from somewhere, anywhere. "Cancel my next meeting," he barked at his assistant, grabbing his jacket. "Where are you going?" she asked, confused. "Out. Don't wait up." Driving aimlessly through the outskirts of San Jose, Elon found himself in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It wasn't the kind of place he visited often. Simple streets lined with modest houses, far removed from the tech-driven chaos of Silicon Valley. He pulled over near a small community center, where a sign out front read, "Annual Science Fair. Today only." For reasons he couldn't quite explain, Elon stepped out of the car. Maybe he was chasing a distraction. Maybe he just wanted to remind himself why he'd fallen in love with science in the first place. Inside, the atmosphere was charmingly chaotic. Kids bustled around makeshift booths, proudly showing off their experiments to amused parents and disinterested judges. The smell of popcorn mingled with the hum of clunky science projects. Elon walked past volcano models and solar system dioramas, trying not to draw attention to himself. Then he saw it. Tucked away in a dimly lit corner of the room was a display that stood out, not because it was flashy, but because it was so meticulously put together. A gangly teenager, no older than 14, stood nervously beside a crude contraption of wires, capacitors, and a rotating coil. Above him, a hand-drawn poster read, "Infinite Energy, the Next Generation Battery Concept." Elon's curiosity was piqued. He approached the booth. "Interesting title," he said, startling the boy. "Infinite energy, huh? That's a bold claim." The teenager turned, his brown eyes wide with a mix of excitement and panic. "It's not infinite," he stammered. "It's just really efficient." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Efficient how?" The boy gestured to his setup. "It's a closed-loop energy system. I mean, almost. It uses a combination of graphene supercapacitors and a regenerative magnetic field to reduce energy loss during transfer. It could make batteries last 10 times longer without increasing size or weight." Elon crossed his arms, intrigued despite himself. "And you came up with this on your own?" "Yes," the boy replied quickly, then hesitated. "Well, mostly. I read a lot of articles online, and I experiment in my spare time. But the idea, it's mine." "What's your name, kid?" "Liam. Liam Carter." Before Elon could ask more, a middle-aged man in a cheap suit approached the booth, glancing skeptically at the device. "Nice try, Liam," the man said with a patronizing smile. "But this is just theoretical, right? Not functional." Liam's cheeks flushed. "It works," he insisted. I don't have the resources to build it properly." The man chuckled and moved on, shaking his head. Liam looked down, gripping the edge of his table tightly. Elon watched the exchange, his mind already racing. "Show me," he said. "What?" "Prove it. Show me how it works." Liam hesitated, glancing at the worn components of his device. "I haven't been able to test it properly. I don't have enough power to run the full setup. But I have the calculations. They're solid." Elon leaned closer. "Then let's see the math." Liam scrambled to grab his notebook, flipping through pages filled with scribbles, diagrams, and formulas. Elon skimmed the notes, his eyes narrowing in concentration. The equations were rough, but there was potential, real potential. "Where did you learn this?" Elon asked. "Mostly YouTube," Liam admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "And a few library books." Elon suppressed a smile. This kid was no ordinary science enthusiast. He was raw, unpolished, but brilliant. "You're right," Elon said finally, handing the notebook back. "Right about what?" "That you don't have the resources." "But I do." Liam stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Elon said, stepping back and motioning for Liam to follow. Pack up your project. You're coming with me. As the boy packed up his materials, Mrs. Harriet, his foster mom, approached, her brow furrowed. What's going on here? Elon extended a hand. Elon Musk. Your kid just might have the key to the future of energy. Mrs. Harriet looked at Liam, then back at Elon, bewildered. Is this some kind of joke? No joke, Elon said, but it's a gamble, one I'm willing to take. The chapter ends as Liam glances at Mrs. Harriet for approval, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Will Liam take the leap into a world he's never imagined, or will his insecurities hold him back? Liam sat in the back seat of Elon Musk's Tesla Model S, staring out at the rapidly passing streets of Silicon Valley. The cityscape was a blur of glass buildings, electric billboards, and innovation hubs, so far removed from the small-town familiarity he had known all his life. His project sat snugly in a box on his lap, its fragile components rattling slightly with each turn of the car. He couldn't believe this was happening. Relax, kid, Elon said, glancing at him through the rearview mirror. You look like you're about to face a firing squad. Liam forced a smile, but his nerves were anything but calm. I'm just trying to wrap my head around all this. Are you sure about me? I mean, I'm not exactly, trained. Elon chuckled. Trained geniuses are overrated. I've met plenty of them, and most don't think outside the box. You, on the other hand, built a prototype with scraps and a dream. That's the kind of thinking we need. The car fell silent again, giving Liam a moment to process. For most kids, being plucked from obscurity by a billionaire would have been a dream come true. But for Liam, it was terrifying. All his life, he had been taught not to expect much. Keep your head down. Don't draw attention to yourself. Things like this didn't happen to kids like him, kids from the foster system. It hadn't always been this way. Liam's early years had been filled with laughter, his parents doting on him endlessly. His dad was an electrician who loved tinkering with gadgets, and Liam often sat beside him in the garage, watching in awe as wires and circuits came to life. His mom, a librarian, introduced him to the world of books, igniting his endless curiosity. But everything changed when he was 6. A rainy night, a slippery road, and a speeding truck had taken his parents away in an instant. Liam survived the accident but was thrust into the foster care system, bouncing from one home to another. He learned quickly that foster care was a world of rules and expectations. Some homes were kind but overwhelmed, like Mrs. Harriet's, while others were cold and distant. He was just another kid in the system, easily overlooked. Mrs. Harriet was different, though. She wasn't perfect. No one could be when juggling 3 foster kids and a minimum wage job, but she cared. She made sure Liam had a roof over his head, food on the table, and enough books to keep his mind busy. When she noticed his fascination with science, she scraped together what little money she could to buy him secondhand electronics to tinker with. You're gonna be someone someday, she told him once, handing him an old soldering kit. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Still, Liam had grown used to disappointment. Dreams were dangerous things. They could be taken away too easily. As they pulled up to Tesla's headquarters, Liam's heart began to race. The building was massive, gleaming in the afternoon sun like something out of a sci-fi movie. Employees with ID badges streamed in and out, their strides purposeful and confident. Elon stepped out of the car, gesturing for Liam to follow. Come on, kid. Time to see where the magic happens. Liam hesitated, gripping the box on his lap. What if I mess up? Elon paused, his hand on the car door. Here's a secret, he said, leaning down slightly. Everyone messes up. The trick is learning faster than everyone else. That didn't exactly calm Liam's nerves, but it did make him step out of the car. The interior of Tesla HQ was like nothing Liam had ever seen. The air buzzed with activity as engineers in lab coats discussed projects over holographic displays. Robots whirred along conveyor belts, assembling components with precision. In one corner, a group of scientists argued passionately about what Liam could only assume was rocket science. Welcome to the future, Elon said, waving an arm. And, if we play our cards right, the next phase of your journey. They walked down a sleek corridor and entered a spacious lab filled with cutting-edge equipment. Liam couldn't help but gape at the rows of 3D printers, laser cutters, and experimental materials he'd only read about online. Elon turned to him. "Okay, kid, this is your playground. Show me what you can do." Liam swallowed hard, setting his box on a nearby workstation. Carefully, he began unpacking his project, assembling the pieces with the precision of someone who had done it 100 times before. As he worked, Elon leaned against a table, watching him closely. For all his confidence, Elon was taking a risk. Bringing a foster kid into Tesla wasn't exactly standard protocol. But something about Liam reminded him of himself at that age. Scrappy, unpolished, and hungry for something bigger than the world around him. "Almost ready," Liam mumbled, adjusting a wire. "You've got this," Elon said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Finally, Liam flipped a switch, and the device hummed to life. The coil began to spin, and a small bulb lit up, its glow steady and bright. Elon stepped closer, impressed. "Not bad. What's the efficiency rate?" "About 90%, Liam said, trying to sound confident. "That's impressive," Elon admitted. "But can it scale?" Liam hesitated. "I think so, but I'd need better materials. And, well, more resources." Elon smiled. "You've got them, but you're going to have to prove it to the rest of the team." Liam's stomach dropped. "The team? They're not as easily impressed as I am," Elon said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Welcome to Tesla, Liam. Let's see if you've got what it takes." Liam sat at a sleek conference table, surrounded by Tesla's top engineers and scientists. The room was intimidating. Its walls lined with white boards filled with equations far more advanced than anything Liam had ever studied. Overhead, a giant LED screen displayed his device, taken apart and magnified to the tiniest detail. The people in the room weren't just brilliant, they were legends in their fields. Some had worked on groundbreaking AI, others on Mars-bound rockets. And all of them were now staring at Liam with expressions that ranged from skeptical to downright dismissive. Elon sat at the head of the table, his casual demeanor doing little to diffuse the tension. "All right, everyone," he said, motioning toward Liam. "This is Liam Carter. He's got an idea I think could change everything." The room was silent for a beat before a woman in a lab coat leaned forward, her sharp gaze fixed on Liam. "With all due respect, Mr. Musk, we usually vet ideas more rigorously before bringing them to this stage. A science fair project hardly seems." "Just give him a chance," Elon interrupted, his tone firm. "He's here for a reason. Let him explain." Liam swallowed hard, his palms sweating. He stood slowly, glancing at Elon, who gave him an encouraging nod. Hi," Liam began, his voice cracking slightly. I know I'm not, qualified like all of you. But I think I've found a way to increase battery efficiency by using a closed-loop system that reduces energy loss." He paused, hoping for some reaction. The room remained silent, the engineers exchanging doubtful glances. "Can you elaborate?" the woman asked, her tone icy. Liam fumbled with his notebook, flipping to the pages filled with equations. "The system uses graphene supercapacitors and a regenerative magnetic field. The idea is to recycle energy that would normally be lost as heat and redirect it back into the system. I know it's not perfect yet, but the prototype works, at least on a small scale." A man in his 50s leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "And what happens when you scale it up?" "Increased energy density could lead to thermal instability. Your system might overheat or even explode." Liam's face flushed. He'd considered that possibility, but without access to advanced materials, he hadn't been able to test for it. I know there are risks," he stammered, "but I think with better materials, we can manage the heat dissipation more effectively." The woman smirked. "Think? In this field, thinking isn't enough. You need proof." Liam's stomach churned. He glanced at Elon, who was watching the exchange intently but didn't intervene. Just as the tension in the room became unbearable, another voice cut through. "Show us the prototype," said a younger engineer with tousled hair and a curious expression. The others murmured in agreement. If nothing else, they wanted to see if the boy's device could actually do what he claimed. Liam stepped forward, placing his device on the table. His hands shook as he connected the wires and flipped the switch. The coil began to spin, the bulb glowing brightly, just as it had in the lab. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, one of the engineers spoke up. "The efficiency's impressive for something so crude. How did you stabilize the magnetic field?" Liam perked up slightly, his confidence returning as he explained his method. The questions kept coming, growing more technical with each turn. Some were genuine, others clearly meant to trip him up. Liam answered as best he could, his nerves giving way to the thrill of discussing his work. After what felt like hours, the older man leaned forward, his expression skeptical but no longer dismissive. "It's a clever idea, I'll give you that. But clever ideas are a dime a dozen. Proving it can work on a large scale, that's the real challenge." Elon finally spoke, breaking his silence. "That's why he's here. Liam doesn't have the resources to take this further, but we do. I'm betting on him, and on all of you, to make this work." The room fell silent again, the weight of Elon's words settling over everyone. Later, as the meeting adjourned, Elon pulled Liam aside. "Not bad for your first time in the lion's den," he said with a grin. Liam exhaled, his knees weak. "They really don't hold back, do they?" "Nope," Elon replied. "And they shouldn't. The stakes are too high. If this works, we're talking about revolutionizing energy storage, not just for Tesla, but for the entire planet. That kind of pressure isn't for everyone." "I don't know if I can handle it," Liam admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Elon knelt slightly, meeting Liam's eye. "You don't have to have all the answers right now. You just have to keep going. Failure isn't the end. It's just data." Liam nodded, though doubts still gnawed at him. That night, Liam found himself in the small apartment Tesla had arranged for him. It was far nicer than anything he'd ever lived in before. Clean, modern, and filled with amenities he didn't even know how to use. But instead of feeling excited, he felt overwhelmed. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at his device. The bulb still glowed faintly, a reminder of what had brought him here. But as he thought about the day's events, the skepticism, the scrutiny, he couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong. Back home, Mrs. Harriet's words echoed in his mind. "You're gonna be someone someday. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Liam clenched his fists. Maybe he wasn't ready. Maybe he didn't have all the answers. But he wasn't going to give up, not yet. Liam arrived at the lab early the next morning, well before most of the Tesla team had clocked in. The sun hadn't yet risen over Silicon Valley, and the world was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos he knew would erupt as the day wore on. He stood at the glass doors for a moment, staring at his faint reflection. His nerves buzzed, his thoughts racing between excitement and dread. This was a chance most people could only dream of, but it also felt like a weight he wasn't sure he could carry. "You planning on going in, or just decorating the doorway?" Liam turned to see the young engineer from the meeting yesterday, the one who had spoken up in his favor. The man had a coffee in one hand and a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. "Oh, yeah," Liam stammered, stepping aside. The engineer smirked and held the door open for him. "I'm Ethan, by the way. Systems optimization." "You?" "Liam. Just Liam." "Well, just Liam," Ethan said. "If you're here this early, you've either got something to prove or you're avoiding someone. Which is it?" "Maybe both," Liam admitted. Ethan chuckled and gestured toward the main lab. "Come on. I'll show you the ropes before the sharks get here." The lab was already alive with faint hums of machinery, even though most of the team hadn't arrived yet. Ethan walked Liam through the workspace, pointing out different stations: thermal testing, materials engineering, data analytics. It was a world Liam could barely comprehend, yet one he desperately wanted to be part of. "So, your little project," Ethan said as they stopped by a cluster of 3D printers. "It's got potential, but it's also got holes. Big ones." Liam bristled slightly, but he nodded. "I know. That's why I'm here, to fix them." "Good attitude," Ethan said. "You're gonna need it. Around here, ideas are like currency, and everyone's got a bank full of them. If you want to stand out, you've got to show your work, again and again, until no one can deny you." As the day progressed, the lab filled with engineers and scientists, all buzzing with purpose. Liam found himself stationed at a corner bench, hunched over his prototype as he worked on integrating suggestions from the team. It wasn't long before the challenges piled up. Scaling his design wasn't as simple as swapping out materials or increasing the size of the components. Every change introduced new variables: heat distribution, energy feedback loops, structural integrity. Liam's notebook quickly filled with calculations, diagrams, and more than a few frustrated scribbles. By mid-afternoon, his head was pounding. The noise of the lab, the clatter of tools, the hum of machinery, the constant chatter of engineers, felt like it was closing in on him. "You look like you're about to explode," Ethan said, appearing at Liam's side. "I just need a minute," Liam muttered, setting down his tools. Ethan glanced at the prototype, then at Liam. "Come on," he said. "Let's take a walk." Outside, the air was cool and refreshing. Ethan led Liam to a small patio area overlooking the Tesla campus. "You're overwhelmed," Ethan said bluntly. "No kidding," Liam replied, sinking into a chair. "Look, no one's expecting you to have all the answers right away," Ethan said. "But you've got to pace yourself. This place will chew you up and spit you out if you let it." Liam stared at the horizon, his thoughts swirling. I don't want to let Elon down. Or you. Or anyone." Ethan laughed. "Let me tell you a secret. Elon's let plenty of people down. He's failed more times than most of us will in our entire careers. But he keeps going. That's why he's Elon Musk." Liam frowned. "That doesn't make it any easier." "No, it doesn't," Ethan admitted. "But you're here for a reason, kid. Elon doesn't just take chances on people for fun. He sees something in you. Maybe it's time you start seeing it in yourself." Re-energized by the conversation, Liam returned to the lab with renewed focus. He spent the rest of the evening tweaking his design, running simulations, and testing new materials. By midnight, most of the team had left, but Liam was still at his bench, his prototype glowing faintly under the overhead lights. He was exhausted, but for the first time since arriving at Tesla, he felt a glimmer of hope. As he packed up for the night, his mind was already racing with ideas for tomorrow. As Liam starts to find his footing, an unexpected challenge arises. A competing project within Tesla threatens to overshadow his work. Will Liam's ideas survive the competition, or will he be left behind? The next morning, Liam walked into the lab feeling cautiously optimistic. He'd spent hours fine-tuning his prototype and felt like he was finally making progress. But as he rounded the corner to his station, the hum of conversation from a nearby cluster of engineers caught his attention. "Have you seen what Atlas is working on?" one voice whispered, just loud enough for Liam to hear. "They're calling it a quantum leap," another replied. Curious, Liam edged closer, pretending to review his notes while straining to catch more of the conversation. "Atlas says their design will boost energy output by 30% without the overheating problem," someone added. Liam frowned. Atlas? He'd heard the name mentioned briefly during his onboarding, but no one had explained who or what they were. "Who's Atlas?" Liam finally asked Ethan when he found him at a coffee machine. Ethan groaned, rubbing his temple. "Atlas Thompson. Let's call him your competition." "Competition?" Liam repeated, his stomach sinking. Ethan nodded. "Atlas is one of Tesla's rising stars. He's been here for years and already has a couple of successful projects under his belt. Smart guy, but, well, let's just say he doesn't play well with others." "What's he working on?" "A similar concept to yours, but his design focuses on modular energy cells that can be swapped out to avoid downtime. It's flashy, scalable, and, unfortunately for you, he's pitching it as the next big thing." Later that day, Liam got his first look at Atlas. The man walked into the lab with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, a small entourage of junior engineers trailing behind him. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and had the kind of charisma that commanded attention. Liam watched as Atlas approached Elon, holding a sleek tablet displaying his project schematics. They spoke in hushed tones, but it was clear Elon was intrigued. "Looks like the golden boy is making his move," Ethan muttered, appearing beside Liam. Liam felt a pang of anxiety. His prototype was promising, but it was still rough around the edges. Compared to Atlas's polished presentation, it felt like a middle school science project. That afternoon, Elon gathered the team for a briefing in the main conference room. "All right, everyone," he began, his tone upbeat but serious. "We have two groundbreaking energy solutions on the table right now: Atlas's modular energy cells and Liam's closed-loop efficiency system. Both have potential, but we can only push one forward in the next phase of development." The room buzzed with murmurs. "To make the decision, we're running a side-by-side performance evaluation," Elon continued. "Each team will have 1 week to refine their prototypes and present their results. The better design moves forward." Liam's heart sank. A week wasn't nearly enough time to address all the flaws in his system. Atlas, meanwhile, smirked from across the room, clearly relishing the competition. "May the best idea win," Elon said, ending the meeting. Back in the lab, Ethan tried to rally Liam's spirits. "Look, you've got a good idea," he said. "You just need to focus on what sets it apart. Forget about Atlas. He's playing his own game." "But what if his design is better?" Liam asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at him all day. "It's not about better," Ethan said. "It's about different. If you can prove your system offers something his doesn't, you've got a shot." The next few days were a blur of work. Liam threw himself into improving his prototype, testing new configurations, and running simulations late into the night. Ethan and a few other engineers pitched in where they could, offering advice and helping troubleshoot issues. But progress was slow. For every problem Liam solved, 2 more seemed to pop up. By the 4th day, exhaustion was starting to take its toll. Meanwhile, Atlas's team appeared calm and collected, their progress seemingly effortless. On the 6th day, Liam hit a breaking point. His latest test had ended in failure, and he felt like he was running out of time and options. "I can't do this," he muttered, slumping against his workbench. "Yes, you can," Ethan said firmly. "You're closer than you think. Just focus on the fundamentals. What's the one thing your design does that Atlas's doesn't?" Liam thought for a moment. It recycles wasted energy. His system swaps out energy cells, but mine eliminates waste entirely." "Exactly," Ethan said. "That's your edge. Lean into it. Show them why efficiency matters more than convenience." The final day arrived, and the lab was filled with a palpable tension as both teams prepared for their presentations. Liam's hands trembled as he connected the last wire on his prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best he could do. Across the room, Atlas's team was already setting up their polished, professional-looking system. Liam nodded, taking a deep breath as Elon called him to the front. The tension in the room was palpable as Liam stood before the gathered team, prototype in hand. Elon Musk, flanked by senior engineers and key decision-makers, leaned forward slightly, his gaze sharp and unyielding. Atlas lounged in a chair across the room, his smug confidence radiating like a beacon. Liam wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans and took a deep breath. This was it, his chance to prove himself. "All right, Liam," Elon said, breaking the silence. "Show us what you've got." Liam began his presentation nervously, stumbling over his words as he described the problem his design aimed to solve: energy inefficiency in high-output systems. But as he moved on to explain the unique aspects of his prototype, he found his confidence growing. "My system," he said, gesturing to the sleek, glowing prototype on the table, "is built around a closed-loop design that captures and recycles waste energy. Traditional systems lose a significant percentage of energy through heat and inefficiency. This design reduces that loss by up to 85%. He pointed to a live feed of data on a monitor, showing the prototype in action. "Here, you can see how it converts wasted energy into reusable power, significantly increasing overall efficiency without the need for additional energy cells or manual intervention." The room murmured in interest. "What about scalability?" one engineer asked. Liam hesitated. Scalability was one of the weak points he hadn't fully resolved. "The design is still in the early stages," he admitted, "but with further development, I believe it can be adapted for larger systems." Elon nodded thoughtfully, but didn't give anything away. When it was Atlas's turn, he strode to the front with the air of a seasoned professional. His prototype, a modular energy system, looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, all sleek angles and glowing panels. My system, Atlas began, his voice smooth and confident, revolutionizes energy storage and deployment. Instead of relying on fixed systems, it uses modular energy cells that can be swapped out in seconds, minimizing downtime and maximizing efficiency. He demonstrated the system, swapping out an energy cell mid-operation without disrupting performance. The crowd was visibly impressed. And unlike traditional closed-loop designs, Atlas added, shooting a pointed glance at Liam, this system is scalable right out of the box. From small-scale operations to industrial applications, it's ready to go. Liam's stomach sank. Atlas had anticipated the weak points in his design and exploited them perfectly. The room fell silent as the presentations ended. Elon stood, his expression unreadable. Both designs are impressive, he said finally. Liam's system offers groundbreaking efficiency, while Atlas's modular design provides unparalleled flexibility and scalability. He turned to the engineers. I want your input. Which direction should we take? The team broke into groups, discussing the pros and cons of each system. Liam sat at his bench, feeling a mix of pride and dread. He knew his design had potential, but had it been enough to outweigh Atlas's polish? After what felt like an eternity, Elon called the room to order. Here's what we're going to do, he said. Atlas's system will move forward for immediate development. It's scalable, and we can deploy it faster. Atlas's team erupted in quiet cheers. But, Elon continued, holding up a hand, Liam's design has incredible long-term potential. We're not shelving it. In fact, I want Liam to head a small team to continue refining it. If he can address the scalability issues, this could be the future of Tesla's energy solutions. Liam blinked in surprise. He'd expected to be dismissed, but instead, Elon had given him a lifeline and a chance to prove himself. As the meeting adjourned, Atlas approached Liam, a sly smile on his face. Not bad, kid, he said, clapping Liam on the shoulder. But next time, try not to trip over your words. Presentation matters. Liam bristled but forced a smile. Thanks for the advice. As Atlas walked away, Ethan appeared at Liam's side. Don't let him get to you, Ethan said. You might not have won the battle, but you're still in the war. That's more than most people can say. Liam nodded, determination hardening in his chest. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The lab was quieter than usual, the hum of machinery and the occasional murmurs from engineers filling the air. While Atlas's team was celebrating their victory and preparing for production, Liam sat at his newly assigned workstation with a small group of engineers Elon had tasked to assist him. The team was lean. Ethan, ever the supportive mentor, Priya, a sharp and meticulous materials specialist, and Marco, a data analyst with a dry sense of humor. They had been briefed on Liam's project and seemed eager to dive in, but Liam couldn't shake the pressure of leading a team. All right, Liam said, addressing them with as much confidence as he could muster. We have to tackle the scalability issue head-on. If we can make this design work on larger systems, it could outperform anything Tesla's done before. Ethan leaned back in his chair. And we've got, what, a month? No problem, he said sarcastically, earning a chuckle from Marco. Priya crossed her arms, her expression serious. First, we need to stress test the current design. If there's even a small flaw, scaling up will only make it worse. Agreed, Liam said. Let's start by running a full simulation. The team worked late into the night, running simulation after simulation. At first, everything seemed promising. The prototype performed well under standard conditions, recycling waste energy efficiently and maintaining stability. But then, as Priya pushed the system to simulate industrial-scale energy output, the data took a troubling turn. The graphs on Marco's monitor began to spike erratically. Guys, Marco said, frowning at the screen. We've got a problem. Liam and Priya hurried over, their eyes scanning the data. What's happening? Liam asked. It's a thermal runaway, Priya said grimly. The system can't handle the heat generated at higher energy levels. If this were real, it would overheat and fail catastrophically. Liam's stomach dropped. But the whole point of the closed-loop system is to prevent energy waste, including heat. This isn't supposed to happen. Well, it is, Priya said. And if we can't fix it, scalability is off the table. The discovery sent a wave of frustration through the team. They spent the next several days dissecting the problem, but every solution they proposed introduced new issues. The heat buildup wasn't just a minor flaw, it was a fundamental limitation of the current design. One evening, as the others took a break, Liam stayed behind, staring at the prototype in front of him. He felt like he was failing, not just himself, but the people who had believed in him. "You look like you're about to punch it," Ethan said, walking over with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Liam and leaned against the workbench. "I don't get it," Liam said, his voice filled with frustration. "I thought I'd accounted for everything, but this flaw, it's like the entire design is built on a faulty premise." "Maybe you're thinking about it the wrong way," Ethan suggested. "What do you mean?" Ethan shrugged. "You're trying to fix the system by working within its limitations. What if the solution isn't fixing the flaw, but rethinking the system entirely?" Liam frowned, Ethan's words sparking a faint glimmer of inspiration. The next morning, Liam called an impromptu meeting with the team. "I think we've been looking at this problem the wrong way," he said. "Instead of trying to force the design to work at scale, we need to rethink the entire framework. What if we integrated a secondary cooling loop specifically for handling heat at higher outputs?" Marco raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about adding redundancy. Won't that reduce efficiency?" "Not necessarily," Liam said, pulling up a rough schematic he'd sketched overnight. "If the secondary loop is only activated under high-stress conditions, it won't interfere with standard operation. It's like a safety net." Priya studied the schematic. "It's ambitious, but it might work. We'd need to test it extensively to make sure it doesn't introduce new vulnerabilities." "That's what we're here for," Liam said, feeling a surge of determination. "Let's get to work." The new approach wasn't without its challenges. Integrating the secondary loop required redesigning several key components of the prototype, and time was not on their side. But for the first time in days, the team felt a sense of momentum. By the end of the week, they had a working model of the revised system. It wasn't perfect, but initial tests showed promise. The secondary cooling loop activated seamlessly under high-stress conditions, mitigating the heat buildup without compromising efficiency. As Liam watched the prototype in action, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they were onto something. The team's excitement over their breakthrough was short-lived. 2 days after implementing the secondary cooling loop, Liam received an unexpected email from a senior project manager. The subject line made his stomach drop. "Urgent. Meeting regarding potential overlap in energy solutions." Liam knew what this meant. Someone, likely Atlas, had caught wind of their revised design and was calling their work into question. The meeting was tense from the moment it began. Elon was there, sitting at the head of the conference table, flanked by senior engineers and project managers. On the opposite side of the room sat Atlas, his smirk as irritating as ever. "So," Atlas began, leaning back in his chair, "it seems Liam's team has taken inspiration from my modular cooling system." "Interesting choice." Liam clenched his fists. "Our secondary loop isn't modular," he said, his voice steady but firm. "It's an integrated system designed to handle thermal spikes without disrupting efficiency. It's completely different from your design." Atlas raised an eyebrow. "Different? From what I've seen, it looks like you've just slapped a cooling system onto your existing design to cover up its flaws." "That's not true," Priya interjected, her voice sharp. "Our system doesn't just cover up flaws. It's a targeted solution that enhances the closed-loop efficiency while maintaining its core advantage, recycling wasted energy." The room murmured as Priya pulled up the latest test results on the screen. The data clearly showed the revised system's performance, including its ability to maintain efficiency under high-output conditions. Elon studied the numbers, his expression unreadable. "Impressive," he said finally. "But Atlas does raise a valid point. Liam, how can you ensure this approach is scalable without introducing new vulnerabilities?" Liam took a deep breath. "That's what we're focusing on now," he said. "The secondary loop is still in its early stages, but with further refinement, we can integrate it seamlessly into larger systems. It's not just a patch, it's a new layer of resilience." Elon nodded, but before he could respond, Atlas spoke again. "With all due respect, Elon," Atlas said, "Tesla can't afford to gamble on unproven designs. My system is ready for deployment now. Liam's is, at best, a work in progress. Elon's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't reply immediately. Instead, he turned to Liam. I'll give you 2 weeks, he said. Prove to me that this system is scalable and reliable. If you can't, we'll have to reconsider the resources we're dedicating to this project. Liam nodded, determination hardening in his chest. Understood. Back in the lab, the team regrouped. That went better than expected, Ethan said, though his tone was far from enthusiastic. At least he gave us more time. Barely, Priya muttered. Atlas is trying to paint us as amateurs. We need to deliver something undeniable. We will, Liam said firmly. But we need to be careful. Atlas is watching us, and I don't trust him not to interfere. Liam's suspicions proved correct. A few days later, during a critical test of their revised system, the prototype malfunctioned. Sparks flew from the circuitry, and the room filled with the acrid smell of burnt components. What the? Marco exclaimed, rushing to shut down the system. As the smoke cleared, Priya examined the prototype, her brow furrowed. This doesn't make sense, she said. The system was fine yesterday. There's no way it should have shorted like this. Liam inspected the damaged components and froze. A critical wire had been severed, deliberately. This wasn't an accident, he said, his voice low but furious. Someone sabotaged it. The team exchanged uneasy glances. Atlas, Ethan said grimly. It has to be. We can't prove it, Priya pointed out. And accusing him without evidence will only make us look bad. Liam's mind raced. They couldn't afford to lose time rebuilding the prototype, but they also couldn't ignore the possibility of further sabotage. That night, Liam stayed late at the lab, setting up a hidden camera to monitor their workstation. If Atlas, or anyone else, tried to interfere again, he would have proof. The next morning, the team began rebuilding the prototype, working tirelessly to recover the lost progress. But the sabotage weighed heavily on Liam. He knew Atlas wouldn't stop until he discredited their project entirely. Liam sat alone in the lab, his eyes glued to the monitor. The footage from the hidden camera had been running for hours, each frame adding weight to the growing suspicion in his mind. At first, nothing unusual stood out, just the normal hustle and bustle of a high-pressure lab environment. His team worked diligently, adjusting the prototype, conducting tests, and making necessary modifications. But then, around 3 a.m., something caught his eye. A figure, someone in a lab coat, entered the room. Liam froze, his heart rate spiking as he recognized the face on screen. It was Marco. Liam rewound the footage, his fingers trembling slightly. There it was again. Marco, alone in the lab, moving toward the workbench where the prototype sat. He paused in front of the unit, looking around as if checking for anyone else. Then, without hesitation, he pulled out a small, tool-like device from his pocket and began tampering with the critical wire. Liam's stomach churned. He had trusted Marco. Hell, the entire team had. Marco was a quiet guy, a bit of an introvert, but he'd always been reliable. Yet here he was, sabotaging their work. Liam's mind raced. Why would Marco do this? He had no motive that Liam could see. Was he working for Atlas? Or was there something else behind it? He needed to confront Marco, but he couldn't do it blindly. He needed proof. Liam called Ethan. Ethan, I need you to meet me at the lab, Liam said, his voice sharp. It's Marco. I think he's sabotaging us. Ethan didn't hesitate. On my way. When Ethan arrived, Liam quickly brought him up to speed. The footage was damning, and Ethan's face hardened as he watched it. Why would he do this? Ethan asked, shaking his head in disbelief. Marco's a good guy. We've all worked late nights together. There's no way he'd do this without a reason. I don't know, Liam replied, but we need to find out. I'll talk to him, but I want you to be ready in case he tries to run or deny it. I can't let him derail this project. They waited for Marco to arrive at the lab, his usual time for starting work. When he entered, Liam could see the subtle unease in Marco's posture. He hadn't seen him like this before. Hey, Marco, Liam said, trying to keep his voice calm. We need to talk. Marco's eyes flickered briefly, and then he shrugged, an almost nervous smile playing on his lips. Sure, what's up? I was going over the security footage, Liam said, his voice firm. I saw you tampering with the prototype. Marco froze, his smile disappearing. For a moment, there was silence. You saw that? Marco stammered. Liam, I can explain. You'd better, Ethan said, stepping forward. Marco took a deep breath, his hands shaking slightly as he rubbed the back of his neck. It's not what it looks like. I swear. Then what is it? Liam demanded. Marco swallowed hard. I didn't mean to sabotage it. I was contacted by Atlas. He offered me something, a reward, if I helped slow your progress down. He knew you guys were making serious headway, and he didn't want it to overshadow his own design. I didn't think it would go this far. Liam felt his chest tighten. So, you took the deal? You sabotaged our work for Atlas? Marco shook his head. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I was struggling financially, and Atlas made it sound like just a small favor. I thought it was just some harmless delay. But when I saw how close you guys were to cracking it, I panicked. I didn't want to hurt the team. I didn't want to hurt you. Liam stared at Marco, struggling to process the betrayal. He had trusted Marco, had called him a friend, and now Marco had betrayed him for a bribe. Why didn't you just tell me? Ethan asked, his voice soft. I was scared, Marco admitted. I thought if I didn't do it, Atlas would make sure I lost my job. And I need this job, I need the money. But now, I see how much I've messed up. Liam's stomach churned. He had trusted Marco. Hell, the entire team had. Marco was a quiet guy, a bit of an introvert, but he'd always been reliable. Yet here he was, sabotaging their work. Liam's mind raced. Why would Marco do this? He had no motive that Liam could see. Was he working for Atlas? Or was there something else behind it? He needed to confront Marco, but he couldn't do it blindly. He needed proof. Liam called Ethan. Ethan, I need you to meet me at the lab, Liam said, his voice sharp. It's Marco. I think he's sabotaging us. Ethan didn't hesitate. On my way. When Ethan arrived, Liam quickly brought him up to speed. The footage was damning, and Ethan's face hardened as he watched it. Why would he do this? Ethan asked, shaking his head in disbelief. Marco's a good guy. We've all worked late nights together. There's no way he'd do this without a reason. I don't know, Liam replied, but we need to find out. I'll talk to him, but I want you to be ready in case he tries to run or deny it. I can't let him derail this project. They waited for Marco to arrive at the lab, his usual time for starting work. When he entered, Liam could see the subtle unease in Marco's posture. He hadn't seen him like this before. Hey, Marco, Liam said, trying to keep his voice calm. We need to talk. Marco's eyes flickered briefly, and then he shrugged, an almost nervous smile playing on his lips. Sure, what's up? I was going over the security footage, Liam said, his voice firm. I saw you tampering with the prototype. Marco froze, his smile disappearing. For a moment, there was silence. You saw that? Marco stammered. Liam, I can explain. You'd better, Ethan said, stepping forward. Marco took a deep breath, his hands shaking slightly as he rubbed the back of his neck. It's not what it looks like. I swear. Then what is it? Liam demanded. Marco swallowed hard. I didn't mean to sabotage it. I was contacted by Atlas. He offered me something, a reward, if I helped slow your progress down. He knew you guys were making serious headway, and he didn't want it to overshadow his own design. I didn't think it would go this far. Liam felt his chest tighten. So, you took the deal? You sabotaged our work for Atlas? Marco shook his head. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I was struggling financially, and Atlas made it sound like just a small favor. I thought it was just some harmless delay. But when I saw how close you guys were to cracking it, I panicked. I didn't want to hurt the team. I didn't want to hurt you. Liam stared at Marco, struggling to process the betrayal. He had trusted Marco, had called him a friend, and now Marco had betrayed him for a bribe. Why didn't you just tell me? Ethan asked, his voice soft. I was scared, Marco admitted. I thought if I didn't do it, Atlas would make sure I lost my job. And I need this job, I need the money. But now, I see how much I've messed up. Liam took a deep breath, trying to steady his emotions. You're going to help us fix this. I can't let you walk away from this and pretend like nothing happened. Marco nodded, his face flushed with shame. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. I'm sorry, Liam. I never meant for it to go this far. The team had no choice but to accept Marco's apology, though the damage had been done. Marco promised to work tirelessly to help them rebuild the prototype, this time without any more interference. But Liam knew this wasn't over. Atlas had a hold over Marco, and who knew how far he'd go to derail their progress. As the team works on rebuilding the prototype, they receive an anonymous tip. Atlas is planning something even more dangerous, something that could ruin everything. Can Liam stop him before it's too late? Or will Atlas's influence destroy the project and their chances at success? The lab was eerily quiet as the team worked late into the night. They were determined to get back on track after the sabotage, but Liam couldn't shake the feeling that Atlas's reach was longer than they realized. They were walking a tightrope, one misstep away from disaster. As they tested the newly rebuilt prototype, Ethan's phone buzzed. "Who's that?" Liam asked, glancing over. Ethan stared at the screen, his brows furrowing. "It's an anonymous message." Liam walked over, his curiosity piqued. Ethan handed him the phone. The message was short but ominous. Atlas is planning a major shutdown. He's been in talks with the board. If you don't act fast, the project's dead. The next step isn't sabotage. It's something much worse. Liam's heart dropped into his stomach. A shutdown? They were barely hanging on as it was, and now, Atlas was pulling strings behind the scenes. "This is bad," Ethan muttered. "Very bad." Liam turned the phone over in his hand. "Who sent this?" "No idea," Ethan said, shaking his head. "It's from a burner account. But the message is clear. We're running out of time." The next morning, Liam called a meeting with the team. They gathered around the table, tension thick in the air. Marco, who had been working in near silence, now looked even more uncomfortable than usual. "Okay, everyone. We have a problem," Liam started, his voice steady but serious. "Atlas is moving to shut us down. Someone tipped us off that he's been talking to the board behind our backs. He's not going to try to sabotage us again. He's going for a full-on shutdown." A stunned silence followed his words. "We need to act fast," Liam continued. "The board's been convinced to invest in Atlas's design. We can't let them shut us down before we finish this. We have two options: go public with what we know, or find a way to prove our design is superior without relying on any corporate connections." Marco shifted uneasily. "What exactly does shut us down mean?" Liam looked at him, his voice low. "It means no more funding, no more resources, no more project. And worst of all, Atlas would take over, claiming it as his own. Our team would be out, and the project would be buried." "We can't let that happen," Priya said, her eyes blazing with determination. "Not after everything we've been through." Liam nodded. "Exactly. But to stop Atlas, we need leverage. We need proof of what he's been doing behind the scenes. His manipulations with the board, his dealings with outside sources, everything. If we expose him, we might be able to save the project." "I know someone who can help," Marco said, his voice quiet. Liam turned to him, eyebrows raised. "What do you mean?" "I know a reporter," Marco explained. "Someone who's been covering tech and corporate corruption for years. If we feed them the right information, they could blow this wide open." "That could work," Priya agreed, leaning forward. "If we have a credible source exposing Atlas's backdoor dealings, the board would have no choice but to listen." "Okay," Liam said, his mind already racing through the next steps. "Marco, get in touch with your reporter. The rest of us will continue pushing the project forward. We need to show that our design is more than just a concept. We need results, and fast." The hours stretched on, and the pressure mounted. Liam's team worked at a frantic pace, their every action now fueled by the knowledge that their future, perhaps even their careers, depended on proving their design's worth. Marco, meanwhile, was on the phone, arranging a meeting with the reporter. He came back to the group a few hours later with an update. "It's set," Marco said, his voice tight. "I'll meet them tomorrow night. We have everything we need to expose Atlas, but we need to be careful. If this gets out too soon, It could backfire. Liam nodded. We'll be careful, but we don't have much time. We need to move fast. Later that evening, as Liam reviewed the latest tests on their system, he received a call. It was from an unknown number. He hesitated for a moment before answering. Liam here. Mr. Fitzgerald, a deep voice on the other end of the line said. I'm afraid I have some bad news. Liam's heart skipped a beat. Who is this? I'm someone who's been watching your project very closely, and I think you'll find this information useful. Liam's pulse quickened. What do you know? Atlas has already convinced a few key members of the board that your design is a failure, the voice continued. They're planning to present it as a threat to Tesla's long-term vision. He's not going to just shut you down. He's aiming for a hostile takeover. He'll force the board to take your project away from you and give it to him. Liam felt a cold chill run down his spine. I don't believe you. Prove it. You'll find out soon enough, the voice said cryptically before hanging up. Liam stood there, his hands shaking. He knew now that they were in deeper trouble than he'd realized. Atlas wasn't just trying to take credit for their work. He was planning to crush them completely. The weight of the information was almost too much for Liam to bear. Atlas had managed to infiltrate not only their project but their very foundation. Every decision he made now had to be precise, calculated. Time was running out. They had one shot at exposing Atlas and saving their work. But there was something nagging at him, a gut feeling he couldn't shake. The anonymous tipster had been right. Atlas wasn't just aiming to shut them down. He was moving to erase everything they'd built, and the moment they revealed their findings, the board would side with him. Liam had to be sure. He gathered the team together in the war room, their faces lined with worry but also determination. They had to act swiftly, and this time, they would need to confront the board, armed with irrefutable proof. Here's the plan, Liam said, pacing in front of the table. Marco is meeting the reporter tonight. We'll get everything to the press, but we have to move fast. I'll prepare our presentation for the board. Ethan, Priya, you two are on backup, in case anything goes sideways. If Atlas tries to pull anything, we need to be ready to shut him down on the spot. Everyone nodded. It was a plan, but it was fragile. One slip-up, and they could all lose everything. Liam glanced at Marco, who was still visibly shaken by the weight of his past mistakes. He trusted Marco, but doubt lingered. I'll handle the reporter, Marco said, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. But I can't do this alone. We need to make sure the board sees the truth. If we can't expose Atlas and his corrupt dealings, this project is over. Agreed, Ethan replied. We're in this together. No turning back now. That evening, Marco met with the reporter, a woman named Clara who had a reputation for exposing corporate corruption. The conversation went smoothly, with Marco providing Clara all the inside information they had on Atlas. She promised to run the story but cautioned them about the backlash. Exposing a figure like Atlas wouldn't just hurt his business. It could cause ripples that would affect them all. As Marco made his way back to the lab, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The pressure of betrayal, sabotage, and the looming threat of Atlas had taken a toll on him. He found himself glancing over his shoulder, paranoid, as though someone was watching him. Meanwhile, Liam was back at the lab, reviewing the data for their presentation to the board. His mind was racing, trying to think of every possible angle. If they could prove Atlas had been manipulating the board, it might just be enough to turn the tide in their favor. But as he went over the figures, something caught his eye. A discrepancy. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. One of the reports, one of the most crucial, had been altered. The numbers didn't match up with the original version. Liam stared at the screen in disbelief. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate. He checked the file's metadata. It had been opened recently by someone on the team. Someone had tampered with the report to make their prototype look inferior to Atlas's design. His heart sank. It couldn't be. Not now. Not when they were so close. Liam didn't waste any time. He called an emergency meeting with the team. Within minutes, they were all gathered around the table, their faces taut with concern. There's a problem, Liam said, his voice tense. One of the reports we were planning to use for the board has been tampered with. The numbers are skewed. Someone's sabotaging us from the inside. Everyone looked shocked, but no one spoke immediately. The tension in the room thickened. You think it's Atlas? Priya asked, her voice tight with anger. He's pulling strings everywhere, trying to make us look bad. I don't think so, Liam replied, shaking his head. This is someone on our side. Someone here, in this room. He let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. I need to know who did this, and I need to know now. Marco's face was pale as he met Liam's gaze. I didn't do it, I swear. I've been working with Clara to get the truth out. I'm not sabotaging this. Liam's eyes flicked to Ethan, then Priya. Both of them seemed as confused as he was, but doubt had crept into his mind. Who would want to destroy everything we've worked for? Liam asked, more to himself than anyone else. Priya crossed her arms, her brow furrowed. Liam, are you sure you're not just overthinking it? We're under a lot of pressure. Maybe it's just a mistake. But Liam wasn't convinced. His gut was telling him otherwise. I don't think so, he muttered. I think someone's playing us. And whoever it is, they're going to make sure Atlas wins. Just then, Liam's phone buzzed. It was a message from Clara. The story's set to go live at midnight. But Liam, I found something. Atlas isn't just working with the board. Someone close to your team is leaking information to him. I have a name. Meet me tomorrow, and I'll tell you who it is. Liam felt his blood run cold. He had trusted his team, but now, it seemed like Atlas had planted a mole among them. The night was heavy with uncertainty. Liam stood in the dimly lit lab, staring at the phone in his hand. The message from Clara was like a cold slap to the face. A mole? He had always trusted his team. Hadn't they been in this together from the beginning? But now, that trust seemed to be crumbling before his eyes. The question lingered. Who among them was working with Atlas? Liam ran his hand through his hair, trying to stay focused. His mind raced. Clara's message was clear. Someone on the inside was leaking information to Atlas. But who could it be? Priya had been his right hand throughout this entire ordeal, but even she was beginning to look nervous. Marco was loyal to a fault, but his past mistakes made him seem like a prime target for suspicion. And then there was Ethan, quiet, calm. But could he be hiding something too? Liam shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He couldn't let suspicion tear the team apart. Not now. They had to pull together, but first, they had to find out who was responsible for this treachery. The next morning, Liam didn't waste any time. He called an emergency meeting. He needed to confront his team directly to see how they reacted to the pressure. We've got a problem, Liam began, his voice steady but betraying his internal turmoil. Clara found something. Atlas isn't just working with the board. He's got someone on the inside, feeding him information. That's why our prototype data was compromised. Everyone exchanged uneasy glances. Who would do that? Marco asked, his voice tight. He seemed genuinely shocked, but Liam couldn't read his face. I don't know yet, Liam said, trying to sound calm. But I need you all to think hard. This is a betrayal of everything we've worked for. Whoever's responsible is working with Atlas to bring us down. We can't let that happen. Priya crossed her arms. Liam, I've been with you through thick and thin. You know I would never. I know, Liam interrupted, holding up his hand. I don't want to accuse anyone, but I need the truth. This isn't about trust anymore. It's about survival. We're up against Atlas, and someone here is helping him. Ethan remained silent, his eyes glued to the table. His fingers tapped nervously, betraying his calm exterior. Liam noticed, but he said nothing. The hours stretched on, and the tension in the lab only grew. Liam's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Could he really trust his team anymore? Or had Atlas planted a seed of doubt so deeply that it would destroy everything they'd built? He knew he had to find out who the mole was before things escalated any further. Clara's message had been a lifeline, but it also left him with a ticking clock. If he didn't act fast, the mole would sabotage their efforts, and Atlas would win. At noon, he received another text from Clara. I've got the name. It's one of your team members. Meet me tonight, and I'll explain everything. But be careful. They're on to you. Liam's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment that could change everything. He couldn't let the mole get any closer to sabotaging the project. He had to confront the person responsible and get the truth. once and for all. Later that night, Liam made his way to the meeting place. It was a small, quiet cafe on the edge of town, far enough from the lab to avoid any unwanted attention. Clara was already sitting at a corner table when he arrived. She looked up as Liam approached, her eyes sharp, scanning him like she was trying to read his every thought. "You came," Clara said, her voice low. "I didn't know if you would, but I have what you need." "Who's the mole?" Liam demanded, leaning forward. His voice was raw with frustration. Clara took a deep breath. "It's Marco." Liam's stomach dropped. The words felt like a punch to the gut. Marco? It didn't make sense. Marco had been the one person he thought he could trust completely. "I don't believe you," Liam said, shaking his head. "Marco's been with us since the beginning. He's not the kind of person who'd sell us out." Clara's gaze hardened. "I didn't want to believe it either, but I followed the trail. He's been meeting with Atlas's people. He's been feeding them information about your project, the prototype, the designs, you name it, and he's been doing it for months." Liam felt the room spin around him. Marco, a traitor? He couldn't fathom it. "I've seen the records, Liam. I can show you the meetings he's had with Atlas's team. They've been in contact for weeks. Marco is working with him." Liam's mind was reeling. Everything he thought he knew was suddenly in question. He needed proof. He needed to confront Marco, to get the truth from him. "I can't believe it," Liam whispered, barely able to keep his voice steady. "But if this is true—" "It is true," Clara insisted, her eyes intense. "You need to be careful. Marco is dangerous now. He's not the same person you trusted." Liam stood up, feeling a cold rage building inside him. "I'm going to confront him." "Don't," Clara said, reaching out to grab his arm. "If you do, he'll warn Atlas. They'll shut you down before you even have a chance to act. You need to be strategic. Take him down quietly." Liam hesitated. He had never felt more betrayed in his life. But Clara was right. He couldn't confront Marco without a plan. If Marco was working with Atlas, the stakes were higher than ever. Liam returns to the lab, determined to expose Marco's betrayal. But as he begins to gather evidence, he's faced with an impossible choice. Expose Marco and risk everything, or find another way to bring down Atlas without destroying the one person he thought he could trust. The final confrontation is inevitable, but the cost may be too high. Liam's mind raced as he walked back to the lab, the weight of Clara's revelation heavy on his shoulders. Marco, the one person he had trusted above all others, was the mole, the one who had been secretly working with Atlas. The realization hit Liam like a physical blow, leaving him numb and uncertain. He couldn't let it end like this. If Marco had really betrayed them, if he had really been leaking their work to Atlas, it would destroy everything they had fought for. The entire project, the future of their technology, it would all be reduced to rubble. But even as the cold anger bubbled inside him, Liam found himself struggling with one simple question. How could Marco, of all people, do this? Marco had always been loyal. He had helped Liam build the team, brought the right people together, and fought alongside him in the darkest moments. He had been there when things seemed impossible, providing encouragement and insight when they needed it most. The idea that he was working for Atlas seemed unimaginable. Back in the lab, the team was already gathered. They were on edge, visibly stressed, as they prepared for the board meeting the next day. But there was an undercurrent of tension that no one could hide. Liam's quiet demeanor had them wondering what was going on in his mind. Priya looked at him, her eyes filled with concern. "Liam, what's going on? You've been distant. We need to be ready for tomorrow." Liam barely heard her. His mind was elsewhere, turning over the possibility of Marco's betrayal. His eyes flicked to Marco, who was sitting at the far end of the table, typing furiously on his laptop. Marco's face was pale, his fingers moving quickly, but something about his posture seemed off. He wasn't the calm, confident Marco Liam had known. There was a nervous energy surrounding him, one that didn't sit right. The words Clara had told him echoed in his mind. Marco's been meeting with Atlas's people. He's been feeding them information for months. Liam's heart pounded. He had to confront Marco, but he couldn't do it recklessly. He needed evidence. He needed to be sure before he made any accusations that would tear the team apart. The tension in the room reached a boiling point as Liam made his decision. He pulled out his phone, opening up a secure channel to Clara. "Can you send me everything you have on Marco?" The seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Then, a response flashed across the screen. "I'll send it to you now. Be careful. They'll be watching him." Liam closed his eyes for a moment, mentally preparing himself. This wasn't just about Marco's betrayal anymore. This was about their survival, about protecting everything they had built. Suddenly, a ding from his phone interrupted his thoughts. Clara's message had arrived, and with it, a set of encrypted files. Liam quickly opened them, his heart racing as he went through the details. There it was. In black and white, Marco's meetings with Atlas's representatives, the subtle exchanges, the secretive emails. The evidence was undeniable. Liam swallowed hard, his throat tight. Marco had been leaking their most important research. The data, the plans for the prototype, it was all in Atlas's hands. Liam felt a wave of nausea wash over him. He wanted to confront Marco right then and there, but Clara's warning rang in his ears. If you confront him, he'll warn Atlas. They'll shut you down before you can act. The thought of confronting Marco so soon was tempting, but it was a risk they couldn't afford to take. He needed to act strategically. He had to gather the rest of the team and expose the truth carefully before Marco could warn Atlas and derail everything. That night, Liam couldn't sleep. He spent hours piecing together the situation in his mind, replaying every conversation with Marco, every interaction, wondering where the betrayal had begun. He remembered the small, seemingly inconsequential moments, Marco's odd behavior, his reluctance to share information, the late-night phone calls that he had brushed off as nothing. Had it all been a lie? Liam couldn't answer that. The betrayal ran deeper than he could have ever imagined. The next morning, Liam gathered the team in the war room. There was no turning back now. He had to expose the truth, but it had to be done in a way that protected their work and gave them a fighting chance. "We need to act fast," Liam said, his voice steady. "I've discovered something. Marco's been working with Atlas. He's the one who's been leaking our research." The room went silent. Priya's face went pale, and Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief. "What?" Priya whispered. "No, that can't be true." "I wish it weren't," Liam replied, his voice tinged with regret. "But I have proof. Marco has been meeting with Atlas's people. He's been feeding them our work for months." Marco's face turned white. His fingers trembled as he slowly lowered his laptop. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," Marco finally managed, his voice low and shaky. I thought I was helping. I didn't think it would turn into this." Priya looked furious. "You thought you were helping? You've been betraying us, Marco. How could you?" Liam felt the betrayal like a physical wound. He had trusted Marco with everything, his vision, his ideas, his hopes for the future, and Marco had torn it all apart. The confrontation was explosive. Marco tried to explain himself, but the damage had already been done. There was no going back. He had chosen his side, and now it was up to Liam and the team to clean up the mess. "I don't know what else to say," Marco said, his voice almost pleading. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. Atlas promised me everything. I was desperate. I didn't think you'd understand." Liam's heart hardened. "You made a choice. You chose to betray us." As the weight of his words settled in, the team was left in stunned silence. What had once been a tight-knit group, united by their passion for the project, was now fractured by lies and betrayal. The room was heavy with tension. Marco's confession hung in the air like a dark cloud, suffocating any hope of a quick resolution. Liam couldn't bring himself to look at Marco anymore. The betrayal cut deeper than anything he had ever faced, and the damage it had done to the team was already evident. Priya's face was flushed with anger, her eyes narrowing with disbelief. Ethan, usually calm and collected, looked at Marco as if he were a stranger. I didn't know who else to turn to," Marco said again, his voice cracking. "I thought I could balance it, help you, and still get the security I needed. But when Atlas started getting more serious, I couldn't back out. I didn't know how to tell you." Liam stood, his fists clenched at his sides. The betrayal was almost too much to process. For months, He had been building something extraordinary, a project that could change everything. But it was all slipping away, unraveling at the hands of someone he trusted. Do you have any idea what you've done? Priya's voice was low, controlled, but every word was laced with hurt. You didn't just jeopardize us. You betrayed every single person who believed in this project. Marco looked at the floor, unable to meet her gaze. I thought I was protecting you, protecting us. You weren't protecting us. Ethan snapped. You were working with the enemy. You were giving them everything we worked for, everything we believed in. His voice cracked with the weight of the realization. Liam had heard enough. He couldn't let Marco drag this out any longer. You need to leave, Liam said, his voice hard and cold. You've done enough damage. If you're working with Atlas, you're no longer part of this team. Marco flinched, as if the words physically struck him. Liam, please. I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix this, but I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. Liam shook his head. It's too late for that. He looked around at the rest of the team. We need to act fast. Atlas will know that we're onto them soon. They'll be expecting a response from Marco. We need to move now, or they'll come for us. Marco stood there, frozen. He was still pleading, but Liam couldn't listen anymore. The truth was clear. Marco had made his choice, and now they were all paying the price. The team quickly scrambled to come up with a plan. Liam couldn't afford to dwell on the past anymore. The betrayal was done, and they had to find a way forward. The information Marco had fed to Atlas could lead to them losing everything. We need to lock down all of our data. Immediately, Priya said, her voice firm with determination. Atlas will use anything they have to dismantle us. We can't let that happen. Liam nodded. Get to it. We need all files encrypted and backup secured. Ethan, I need you to set up a secure line to Clara. We'll need her help. She's our last ally outside of this building. What about Marco? Ethan asked, his voice rough with emotion. Do we just let him walk away? Liam took a breath, considering for a moment. We'll handle him later. For now, we focus on stopping Atlas. We can't afford to waste time. The urgency of the situation was clear. There was no time for anything else. They had to survive, and they had to fight back. But as the team worked tirelessly to secure their systems, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Something more dangerous than just Marco's betrayal. Atlas was coming for them, and they were running out of time. Later that night, as the team finalized their preparations, Liam received an unexpected message from Clara. It was brief but direct. Atlas knows you've discovered the mole. They're moving in. You have 24 hours. Liam's heart skipped a beat. It was happening faster than they had anticipated. The walls were closing in. He looked at his team, who had gathered around the table, their faces pale but determined. They had no choice now. It was either fight back or lose everything. We have 24 hours, Liam said, his voice cold and firm. We don't have time to wait for a miracle. Atlas is coming, and we have to take the fight to them. We need to hit them where it hurts. Priya nodded. We can't just wait for them to make the first move. We need to get ahead of them. Ethan leaned forward. We need a counterstrike. We have to go after the data they have on us. Destroy it before they can use it against us. Liam nodded again. Exactly. And if we're lucky, we can find a way to destroy Atlas's foothold in the company. If we can cut off their supply of information, we stand a chance. As the hours ticked down, the team worked feverishly. Every file was scrutinized, every lead followed. They had to move quickly, stay under the radar, and outsmart Atlas at every turn. But the weight of Marco's betrayal still hung over them, a reminder of just how close they were to losing everything. Then, as the night stretched on, Liam received another message, this time from an unexpected source. Liam, this is Ethan. I've discovered something. Marco wasn't the only one leaking information. There's someone else, someone much closer to you. Liam's blood ran cold. What? He typed, his heart pounding. Who? It's Clara. She's been working with Atlas all along. She's been using you to get close to the project, feeding them your plans. Everything you've been doing. She's been playing both sides. Liam stared at the screen, his fingers trembling. His mind refused to process the words. How could it be Clara? After everything they had been through, After all the support she had shown them, how could she betray them like this? The betrayal of Marco had already shattered Liam's world. But now, with Clara's name on the line, the entire foundation of everything he thought he knew was crumbling. With the team divided and the threat of Atlas looming closer than ever, Liam faces the ultimate question. Can he trust anyone anymore? And if Clara, his last ally, is truly working against them, how will they stop the machine that is Atlas before it destroys everything they fought for? Liam stared at the message from Ethan, his heart racing in disbelief. The idea that Clara, the one person he had trusted the most outside of his team, had been playing both sides was unthinkable. But the evidence was clear. Ethan wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, and if he was saying that Clara had been working with Atlas, it meant she had orchestrated everything, just like Marco. The team had already been rocked by Marco's betrayal, but now, this? It felt like the very foundation of their operation was crumbling beneath them. Clara had been a pivotal part of their efforts to secure the prototype and expand their technology. She had been there from the beginning, offering guidance, resources, and support when they needed it most. But now it was clear. She had been feeding information to their enemies all along. Liam's mind reeled. He couldn't make sense of it. Clara had always been the voice of reason, the one person who understood the bigger picture, the one who kept him grounded. How could she have been working with Atlas? And more importantly, why? What could they possibly have promised her that was worth betraying everything she had worked for? Liam quickly gathered the team, his expression grim. Priya, Ethan, and Marco were already in the war room, the tension in the air palpable. Priya's face was pale, still processing the fallout from Marco's confession. But now the news about Clara had struck a new blow. I just got a message from Ethan, Liam began, his voice steady but full of resolve. Clara has been working with Atlas. She's been feeding them everything. Our plans, our progress, even our weaknesses. The room fell deathly silent. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze unwavering. Priya's hands trembled as she pressed them against the table, her breath catching in her throat. No, Priya whispered, shaking her head. That's not possible. Clara, she's been with us since the beginning. She's one of us. Liam's gaze remained cold, his voice firm. Ethan wouldn't lie about something like this. He's been digging, and it's all there. Every single piece of evidence. Clara has been betraying us just like Marco. Liam, Marco said, his voice tinged with guilt and fear. Are you sure? I mean, Clara was the one who helped me when I was backed into a corner. She was the one who kept pushing for the project to keep moving forward. I never thought she'd. Liam's eyes locked onto Marco's. We're all in this together. We can't afford to doubt anything right now. We're fighting for our lives. Priya stood, her hands clenched into fists. So what now? We've lost Marco, and now Clara? The two people I trusted the most? Are we just supposed to give up? Liam took a deep breath, trying to steady his emotions. No, we don't give up. We fight back. We still have the knowledge, the resources, and the will to take them down. But we have to expose everything before Atlas gets its claws into us completely. Ethan nodded in agreement. We can still use what we've got, but we need to be smart about it. Atlas is not going to go down easily, and now that they know we're onto them, they're going to make their move. The next few hours passed in a blur. The team worked relentlessly to secure the remaining data and prepare for what was coming. But as Liam sat in front of his computer, staring at the encrypted files Clara had sent him, files that now seemed tainted with treachery, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Just as he was about to call a meeting, a notification popped up on his screen. A message from Clara. Liam, I know you've seen the files. Please, let me explain. Liam felt a surge of anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. Let her explain? After everything that had happened? After everything they had built together? He had no interest in hearing her out. He had no interest in being manipulated any further. But then, another message popped up. Liam, please. I never wanted it to go this far. Atlas has been blackmailing me, using my family against me. I never wanted to betray you, but they threatened to destroy everything I hold dear. I never meant to hurt you, or the team. Please, I'm sorry. Liam's heart skipped a beat. Blackmail? Could this really be the reason? Could Clara have been forced into this, with no way out? His hands shook as he read the message again. The image of Clara, standing by his side through every trial, flashed in his mind. But the thought of her betraying him, even under duress, was too much to ignore. He stared at the screen for a long time, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. Could he trust her now? Could he really believe that this wasn't just another part of her plan to deceive him? His mind raced as the clock ticked down. If they were going to expose Atlas, they couldn't afford any more distractions. They had to act now, before Atlas made their move. With a heavy heart, Liam made a decision. He couldn't risk Clara's message clouding his judgment any longer. He would have to confront her, but not just yet. For now, he had to protect the team and the project. Clara's true motives would have to wait. "Get ready," Liam said to the team, his voice resolute. "We're moving out. We're hitting Atlas where it hurts, and we're not going to let them win. We've got one shot at this, and we can't afford to fail." The room fell into a tense silence as they prepared for their final assault. The truth about Clara weighed heavily on Liam's mind, but the only thing that mattered now was surviving the storm ahead. As Liam prepares to lead his team into their final confrontation with Atlas, the truth about Clara's betrayal still lingers in the air. Was she truly forced into this, or has she been playing both sides all along? The clock is ticking, and Atlas is closing in. Can Liam and his team survive the ultimate betrayal, or will they be crushed under the weight of the lies that surround them? The tension in the air was palpable as Liam and his team gathered in the war room. Each member of the team was armed with the knowledge that their survival depended on one thing: taking down Atlas before it could destroy everything they had worked for. But even as they prepared for battle, the shadow of Clara's betrayal loomed large over Liam. He couldn't shake the nagging doubt that maybe he had been wrong. Maybe there was more to her story than he realized. But that would have to wait. Time was their enemy, and they couldn't afford to delay. Atlas was closing in, and they needed to act fast. Liam's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden notification on his screen. It was a message from Clara. "Liam, I know you don't believe me, but please, I'm begging you. I've been forced to work with Atlas, but I never meant to hurt you. They're coming for you, Liam. If you don't act now, it will be too late. Trust me, please." Liam's heart raced as he read the message. Her words seemed desperate, but after everything that had happened, he couldn't let his emotions cloud his judgment. Could she really be telling the truth? He looked up at his team, their faces set with determination. Priya was already working on their next move, while Ethan was analyzing the intel they had gathered. Marco, despite his previous betrayal, was focused and ready to assist in whatever way he could. They were all in this together now, united by a common enemy. "We've got to move," Liam said, standing up from the table. "Atlas is coming for us, and we can't let them take us down. We need to hit them where it hurts, take out their main data hubs and cripple their operations." Priya nodded, her eyes sharp. "We can't afford any mistakes. If we go in, we go in hard." Ethan turned to Liam, his voice low but firm. "We've got one shot at this. If we don't get to them first, they'll use everything we've worked on against us. I don't need to remind you how dangerous they are." Liam clenched his fists, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "We've trained for this. We know what we're up against." Marco looked at Liam with a grim expression. "What about Clara?" Liam's gaze hardened. "We deal with Atlas first. After that, we'll figure out where Clara stands. But right now, she's not our priority." The team spent the next few hours finalizing their plan. They would infiltrate Atlas's headquarters, take control of their servers, and disable their communication systems. They couldn't afford to let Atlas warn its operatives about their attack. It was the only way to keep their secrets safe and expose the corruption within the company. The countdown had begun. Atlas's forces were on the move, and every minute that passed brought them closer to a confrontation that could change everything. As the team prepared for the mission, Liam couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision that lay ahead. There was no turning back now. This was their last chance to stop Atlas, and with it, the conspiracy that had infiltrated their lives. But with Clara's message echoing in his mind, Liam was torn. If she was telling the truth, could he really trust her again? Or had she been playing him all along? He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "We need to move out now," he said, his voice steady. "This ends tonight." As they made their way to the transport vehicles, the air was thick with anticipation. Every member of the team knew what was at stake. They had one chance to take down Atlas, and they couldn't afford to fail. But as they moved closer to the enemy's stronghold, Liam's mind kept returning to Clara. The doubts were there, gnawing at him. Was she really trying to warn them? Or was this just another trap to pull him deeper into the web of deceit? It wasn't long before they arrived at the perimeter of Atlas's compound. Armed guards patrolled the area, but the team had already planned their route. They would infiltrate through a hidden service entrance, avoid detection, and make their way to the central server room. From there, they would disable the systems and steal the data they needed to bring Atlas down. Priya was the first to move, her agility and stealth making her the ideal scout. She led the team through the compound, bypassing security and setting up access points for the rest of the team. Every moment was critical. They couldn't afford to make a mistake. Atlas's security was top-notch, and any slip-up could cost them everything. As they reached the server room, Liam felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. They were inside the heart of the enemy's operation. The data they needed to cripple Atlas's operations was within their grasp. But just as they were about to breach the server room, Liam's communicator buzzed. It was an encrypted message from Clara. "Liam, please. I'm here. I'm in the building. I can help you. But you have to trust me. You're walking into a trap. Atlas is expecting you. If you don't listen to me now, you won't make it out alive." Liam's heart pounded. She's here? Was she really trying to help? Or was this part of the trap? He didn't have time to think it through. The team was already positioned, and they couldn't afford to waste any more time. "Liam," Priya whispered urgently, "what are we doing? We're almost there. We can't hesitate now." Liam's mind raced. He couldn't ignore Clara's message, but he couldn't risk delaying their mission either. The trap could be waiting, but there was no way to know for sure. Liam's heart raced as he stared at the encrypted message from Clara. His fingers hovered over the communicator, unsure whether to respond or simply press forward. The warning was clear. Atlas is expecting you. This is a trap. The weight of the decision bore down on him like a heavy stone. He glanced over at Priya, who was already adjusting her gear, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. Ethan was at the rear, double-checking the security measures they had set in place. Marco was on edge, his gaze flickering nervously between the group and the corridor ahead. The tension in the air was thick. Every step, every decision could mean the difference between life and death. Liam took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "We press forward," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the silence. "We don't have time to second-guess ourselves. We can't afford to waste this opportunity." Priya's eyes flicked to him, searching his face for any hint of doubt. "You sure about this?" Liam's gaze locked onto hers, unwavering. "We go in now. No turning back." With a final glance at his communicator, Liam silenced the message from Clara. As much as the warning weighed on him, he knew that to hesitate would be fatal. They were close, too close, to pull back now. Clara's words could be the truth, but it was too late to change course. The team moved in unison, their every step calculated, their movements precise. They navigated the hallways of the Atlas compound, avoiding cameras, guards, and traps with practiced ease. But as they reached the door to the central server room, a deep sense of unease settled over Liam. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Priya positioned herself at the door, her fingers flying over the keypad. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the dimly lit server room beyond. Rows of sleek, humming machines lined the walls, their cool blue lights casting an eerie glow over the space. "We're in," Priya murmured. "Let's move fast." Liam nodded. They had no time to waste. As they stepped into the server room, the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Something felt off, but he couldn't place it. He glanced at Ethan, who was already moving to the control terminal, ready to upload the virus that would take down Atlas's systems. Marco took up a defensive position near the door, his eyes scanning for any sign of movement. Everything seemed to be going according to plan, until the first explosion shook the building. The blast rocked the room, sending a shockwave through the air. The team was thrown off balance as the walls trembled, and the lights flickered erratically. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and alarms blared in the distance. "Move!" Liam shouted, adrenaline surging through his veins. "They're onto us." He didn't wait for a response. Grabbing Priya by the arm, he pulled her toward the exit. Ethan was already scrambling to execute the virus upload, but the explosion had caused the terminals to short-circuit. He cursed under his breath and began typing furiously, trying to salvage the operation. "Liam, we've got to get out of here," Marco shouted, his voice tense. "This place is rigged to blow." Liam's mind raced as he scanned the room, his thoughts a blur. Clara's warning had been right. Atlas had been expecting them. The trap had been set perfectly. They were surrounded, with no easy way out. "Ethan, get that virus online now," Liam ordered. "We need to disable their systems before they lock us in." "I'm trying," Ethan yelled back, his fingers moving at lightning speed over the broken terminal. "But it's not responding. We're losing time." A second explosion rattled the building, this time closer to the server room. The walls creaked and groaned, as though the entire structure was about to collapse. Panic started to set in as the reality of their situation hit. "We have to move," Priya said, her voice urgent. "Now." Liam nodded, his heart sinking. "Ethan, we can't wait any longer. We have to get out. Let's go." But as they turned to make their escape, the door slammed shut with a deafening clang. The room went dark, and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway. "Looks like you're not going anywhere," a cold voice said. Liam's blood ran cold as he turned toward the sound. Standing in the doorway, blocking their only exit, was a figure he never expected to see. Clara. Liam's mind raced as he processed the sight before him. Clara, the woman who had been by his side through everything, was now standing there, a gun in her hand and a look of cold resolve on her face. "Clara," Liam whispered, his voice barely audible. "What the hell is going on?" Her expression softened for a brief moment, but it quickly hardened again. "I'm sorry, Liam. I really am. But I had no choice. Atlas has my family. If I didn't do this, they would have killed them." Liam's heart dropped into his stomach. Her family? Had she really been forced into this? Could he really blame her for wanting to protect the one she loved? "Clara, please," Liam said, his voice raw. "We're trying to stop them. You can still help us. There's no way out for any of us if Atlas wins." Clara's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she didn't lower the gun. "You don't understand. You never understood. I didn't want any of this. But Atlas," she stopped, as if unsure how to explain herself. "They've been manipulating me, Liam. The truth is, they've been controlling everything." Before Liam could respond, the building shook again, louder this time, followed by the sound of more explosions in the distance. The sound of chaos was closing in. "Clara, we don't have much time," Priya said, her voice firm but desperate. "Help us. We can take them down together." Clara hesitated, the gun trembling in her hand. Liam could see the internal battle she was fighting. She was caught between her past actions and the chance for redemption. I don't know if I can," Clara whispered. "I've done things I can't undo." Liam stepped forward, his voice steady. "You still have a choice. We still have time. But only if you help us." Clara stands at a crossroads, torn between loyalty to her team and the dangerous hold Atlas has over her. Can Liam convince her to betray Atlas and save them all, or has the damage already been done? As explosions tear through the compound, time is running out for the team, and their fate may rest in Clara's hands. The tension in the server room was suffocating. Clara stood in the doorway, the gun still raised, her face a mixture of pain and determination. The sound of explosions echoed in the distance, signaling that time was slipping away. Every second felt like an eternity as the team waited for Clara's next move. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't afford to waste another moment. If Clara was truly conflicted, if there was even a shred of doubt in her mind, he had to reach her. He had to make her understand that their only chance for survival was to work together. "Clara," he said, his voice soft but urgent, "I get it. You've been forced into this, but we still have time to stop Atlas. You can still help us. Help everyone. You're not alone in this. Clara's gaze flickered to the ground, then back up at Liam. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. Atlas, they've made me believe that this is the only way, that I have no choice. If I don't stop you, they'll kill my family. The words hit Liam like a punch to the gut. He had always known that Clara's decisions were influenced by fear, but hearing her speak of her family's lives being held over her like a weapon brought the full weight of her struggle into sharp focus. You're not alone, Clara, Liam repeated, taking a step closer. We can help you. We can bring Atlas down together. You don't have to carry this burden alone anymore. Clara's hand tightened around the gun, but her eyes betrayed her internal conflict. The struggle was written all over her face. She wanted to believe him, but she was too scared to take the leap, too scared of what would happen if she made the wrong choice. Priya stepped forward, her voice calm but forceful. You think Atlas will let you go, even if you help us? They won't. The only way you can save your family is to end this nightmare once and for all. You're in this too deep to go back to the way things were. But you can change everything right now. Clara's breath hitched as she considered Priya's words. The gun lowered slightly, her fingers trembling. It was a small sign, but it was enough. Liam didn't move. He waited for her to make her decision. I don't know if I can do this, Clara whispered, the gun slipping from her grasp and clattering to the ground. I've hurt so many people. I don't know if I can ever make it right. Liam stepped forward, closing the distance between them. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Clara, we all have pasts we regret, but we can't change what's behind us. We can only fight for what's ahead. Your family deserves better. You deserve better. Clara's eyes welled with tears, but she nodded slowly. Okay, let's do this. For my family. In that moment, the walls that had separated them seemed to crumble. Clara had made her choice, and with it, the team's chance for survival and victory had just been restored. With Clara now on their side, the team wasted no time. They quickly regrouped, each member aware that the clock was ticking. The building was falling apart around them, and Atlas's forces were closing in. But now, with Clara's knowledge of the compound and its security systems, their chances of taking down Atlas were better than ever. Clara, tell us what we need to do, Liam said, his voice steady as he made eye contact with her. Clara wiped the tears from her face and took a deep breath. There's a central control hub deep inside the compound. It's where they monitor everything: communications, security, data transfers. If we can take that down, we can cripple Atlas's operations from the inside. Lead the way, Liam said, nodding firmly. As Clara led them through the winding corridors of Atlas's compound, she explained the layout in detail, pointing out critical points of entry and possible threats. The team followed closely behind her, trusting her to guide them through the maze of security. But as they neared the central hub, the sounds of footsteps grew louder, and the unmistakable sound of armed guards echoed through the hallway. They were almost there. We need to move fast, Clara said urgently, her eyes scanning the hallway ahead. Liam nodded. Get to the control hub. We'll cover you. The team moved quickly, but stealthily, using every advantage they had to avoid detection. As they reached the control room, the door slid open, and they found themselves face to face with Atlas's final line of defense. Armed guards stood at attention, their weapons trained on the entrance. Clara hesitated for a moment, but Liam knew that now was not the time for doubt. He motioned for Priya and Marco to flank the guards while Ethan prepared to disable the security systems. Clara, you're with me, Liam said, his voice low but firm. Together, they charged forward, taking the guards by surprise. It was a brief but brutal skirmish. In the chaos, Ethan quickly hacked into the security network, disabling the alarms and locking down the facility's defenses. Marco and Priya neutralized the remaining guards, their swift movements ensuring no one was left standing in their way. With the control room now in their hands, the team rushed to the central console. Clara moved with purpose, her fingers flying over the keys as she began the process of uploading the virus that would take down Atlas's operations. But just as they thought they had one, the door to the control room slammed shut. A voice came through the speakers, cold and calculating. You thought you could destroy everything I've worked for? The voice said, mocking. You're too late. Liam's heart sank as he recognized the voice. It was Jonathan Ashford, the mastermind behind Atlas. You'll never escape, Ashford continued. You're trapped in here with me. And now, it's over. The door is locked, the enemy's voice taunts them, and the building shakes from another explosion. Ashford has them cornered. Will the team be able to finish what they started? Can they defeat Ashford and escape before Atlas crumbles around them? As the clock ticks down, survival is no longer just a matter of success. It's a race against time. The voice of Jonathan Ashford echoed through the control room, chilling the team to their core. The door had slammed shut, locking them inside. The flashing red lights and sirens intensified, heightening the urgency of the situation. The walls seemed to close in as the explosion that had rocked the building earlier reverberated through the compound once more. Liam's pulse raced. They were running out of time. We need to finish the upload now, Ethan said, his hands flying over the control panel as he worked to override the security measures. Ashford's right. This place is going down, but we can still take Atlas with us. Clara, who had already set the virus in motion, stood motionless by the console, her face pale. Her eyes flickered toward the door, as though she were waiting for the inevitable, waiting for Atlas's enforcers to burst through. But her hand remained steady on the keyboard, her mind focused on one thing: stopping Atlas. We're not letting him win, Liam said firmly, his voice cutting through the chaos. Not after everything we've been through. Priya moved to the door and scanned the monitors, her tactical mind working overtime to find an escape route. There's a back tunnel we can use to get out, but it's sealed off. We're going to have to blow through it. Marco, always the pragmatist, grunted. We don't have the time, but we don't have a choice. If we're going to make it out alive, we need to move now. Liam's mind raced. They were up against a ticking clock, and Ashford's threats were no idle words. The compound was rigged with explosives, and their only chance to disable the network would be to complete the virus upload. That was the key to ending Atlas. But there was something even more important now: getting out alive. We've come too far to fail now, Liam said, determination settling in his gut. Clara, is there a way to speed up the upload? Clara didn't look up as she typed, her fingers moving quickly. If I can access the mainframe, it will be done faster. I need to get to the server room. It's a risk, but we don't have any other choice. Liam's heart clenched. Then we go. All of us. The team moved quickly, their pace frantic as they left the control room. The building was shaking more violently now, the ground beneath them rumbling as if the structure itself was trying to resist the inevitable collapse. Ethan and Priya led the way, scanning the hallways for any sign of Atlas's remaining forces. Marco followed closely behind, his eyes darting from side to side, ready for an ambush. Liam stayed close to Clara, who seemed to have lost some of the hardened resolve she'd shown earlier. Her eyes were distant, haunted, but she was determined to finish what she had started. They reached the server room in record time, and Clara immediately set to work, bypassing security systems with practiced ease. As the whir of the machinery filled the room, Liam could hear Ashford's voice again, this time louder, more insistent. You think you can stop me? You're already too late. The backup systems are engaged. You won't even make it out of here alive. This is my legacy, and I will not let you destroy it. The walls shuddered as another explosion rocked the compound. The hum of the machines around them seemed to grow louder, and Liam knew that every second counted. They were running out of time. Clara's fingers moved with lightning speed, but the tension was suffocating. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she worked, her breathing shallow. I can do this, just a few more seconds. Behind them, the door to the server room rattled violently. The sound of heavy footsteps grew louder, followed by the unmistakable hiss of the locking mechanism disengaging. Ashford's men, Priya whispered, her voice barely audible over the noise. We don't have long. Liam's mind was spinning, his thoughts racing. He knew they were close. But with Atlas closing in on them, every move was a gamble. His gaze locked onto Clara, who seemed to be holding her breath as the upload reached its final stages. Suddenly, the door slammed open. You're too late, Ashford's voice came through, filled with smug triumph. I won. Now it's time for you all to die. A group of Atlas's elite soldiers poured into the room, weapons raised. They were surrounded. "Clara!" Liam shouted as the gunfire erupted, filling the air with a deafening roar. Without hesitation, Clara hit the final command on the console, and the servers in front of her began to power down. The lights in the room flickered, and then nothing. For a brief, terrifying moment, the air was still. Then, one by one, the monitors went dark. The servers go offline, but the team is trapped in the server room with Atlas's soldiers closing in. Ashford's victory feels imminent. But what if Clara's final act of defiance has just triggered the endgame? The future of the world rests in their hands, but will they survive long enough to see it through? The room was plunged into a tense silence, the only sound the sharp, staccato breathing of the team. Ashford's elite soldiers stood at attention, their weapons still aimed directly at the group. Clara's heart raced as she looked over her shoulder, feeling the weight of the moment. She had just activated the virus, but it wasn't clear if it had worked. The servers were down, but would Atlas's systems collapse completely? Or had she just sealed their fate? The leader of the soldiers, a towering figure with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward, his eyes cold with malice. "You think you can defeat Atlas so easily?" he sneered. "You're all going to die here." Liam took a steadying breath, his mind moving faster than his body. He could feel the pressure mounting. One wrong move, and they were finished. But they weren't going down without a fight. "Clara," Liam said quietly, "you did it. We just need to hold them off long enough for the virus to spread. Can you?" But before he could finish, the room shook violently. The building groaned, as though protesting the internal chaos. The sound of distant explosions echoed from every corner, followed by a series of blaring sirens. The walls trembled again, this time more intensely. The countdown had begun. Atlas was crumbling. Clara's eyes widened. "It's happening. The virus is working." Priya stepped forward, her eyes scanning the soldiers. She gestured for the team to move. "We need to get out of here now. The building's coming down." A soldier aimed his weapon at Clara. "No one's going anywhere," he growled. Without hesitation, Marco lunged at the soldier, disarming him with a swift move that left the man crumpled on the floor. In the confusion, Ethan dove behind a nearby console, activating a series of countermeasures to block the door. Liam grabbed Clara's arm, pulling her toward the exit. "Move. We don't have much time." But as the group made their way to the exit, Ashford's voice boomed through the intercom once again, sending a chill down their spines. "Do you think you've won?" Ashford's voice was laced with venom. "This facility is a fortress. You'll never escape. But I'll let you in on a little secret. It's not just Atlas that's going down. You're all going to be buried with me." A loud bang echoed from somewhere deep within the building, and the lights flickered. The ground shook again, more violently this time. The countdown was nearing its end. "We're running out of time," Ethan said, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to move now." With no time to spare, the team raced through the labyrinthine hallways, using every shortcut Clara knew to avoid the remaining guards. The entire building was in chaos. Panic spread through the halls as Atlas's operations began to fail. The screens that had once displayed unshakable control were now flickering, as data streams began to overload and collapse. They reached the exit, but it was blocked by debris from the crumbling structure. Smoke billowed from the walls, filling the air with a choking haze. The team scrambled to clear the way, using all their strength to shift the massive pieces of metal and concrete. Behind them, the sound of soldiers shouting and running grew louder, but they weren't going to stop. Not now. Not when the end was so close. Liam's muscles burned, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but he didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the debris cleared just enough for them to squeeze through. They spilled out into the open air, the night sky overhead. The distant sounds of explosions and destruction reverberated around them as the Atlas compound began to collapse in on itself. As they sprinted toward the extraction point, the team could feel the ground beneath their feet rumbling. The building was falling apart faster than anyone had anticipated. Each step took them closer to freedom, but the danger wasn't over. The countdown was almost finished. Clara's voice cracked as she spoke. We've done it. Atlas is gone. The virus, it worked. But as the team neared the edge of the compound, a sharp voice called out from behind them. It was Ashford. You think you've won? His voice was laced with fury and desperation. You may have crippled my organization, but you will never leave here alive. Liam turned, his heart racing. Ashford was standing on a balcony above them, looking down with a wild gleam in his eyes. He held a detonator in his hand, the final weapon to bring everything to a close. You're too late, Ashford hissed. The entire facility is rigged to explode. You're not escaping. You'll all burn with me. The team froze. The detonator in Ashford's hand was their final obstacle. If he pressed it, they would all be caught in the blast. But Liam's mind raced. There had to be a way out. They couldn't fail now. Ashford, Liam called out, stepping forward. His voice was steady, though his heart was hammering in his chest. You're done. This is over. Ashford's laugh was manic, echoing through the night. It's never over, Liam. Not for me. He raised the detonator higher. The tension in the air was suffocating. Ashford stood above them, the detonator clenched tightly in his hand, his gaze filled with fury and madness. The countdown was nearly over. The facility, once the epitome of technological power, now seemed like a tomb. Every explosion, every rumble of the earth beneath their feet, told them that the end was drawing near. Ashford, don't do this, Liam said, his voice calm but firm. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, his mind racing for a solution. It's over. You're the one who's trapped now. Ashford's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a twisted smile. You think you've won? You don't understand. I am Atlas. And now, I'm going to bring everything down with me. Clara's hands were shaking, but her voice was steady as she spoke. Ashford, this is pointless. You've lost. You can still walk away from this. There's no need to die with this building. Ashford's laugh was cold and bitter. Die with the building? No. I'll be remembered for what I've done. I will decide how this ends. Liam took a deep breath, scanning the room for anything that could help. The extraction point was still a distance away, and Ashford's men were closing in from all sides. There was no time left for talk. He needed to act, and fast. Without warning, Marco sprinted forward, his movements quick and precise. He dove behind a stack of crates, trying to get closer to Ashford. Priya followed suit, keeping her eyes on Ashford's movements. Ethan and Clara flanked them, waiting for the right moment. Ashford, Liam shouted again, this time louder, more forceful. You're alone now. You've got nothing left. Let it go. Ashford hesitated, just for a moment. His grip on the detonator tightened. You really think I'm just going to give up? In that moment, Liam saw it, the tiniest flicker of doubt in Ashford's eyes, the tiniest crack in his armor. It was the opening they needed. Clara now. Liam yelled. Clara, without missing a beat, charged forward, using the chaos of the moment to reach the control panel hidden beneath the balcony. Her fingers flew across the buttons, quickly typing in the override code she'd memorized. As she worked, Ashford's eyes went wide with realization. No, he shouted, but it was too late. The detonator in his hand malfunctioned as Clara's virus, still running in the system, triggered a complete shutdown of the compound's remaining security. The lights flickered again, then turned off altogether. The deadly countdown on the facility's explosive devices was halted. Ashford's face contorted with rage. He lunged toward Clara, but Marco was faster. With a swift motion, he tackled Ashford to the ground, knocking the detonator from his hand. The two men struggled on the floor, but Marco's experience in close combat gave him the upper hand. He pinned Ashford down, holding him firmly as Priya stepped forward, breathing heavily, her eyes locked on Ashford. You're finished, Priya said coldly, her weapon aimed squarely at Ashford's chest. You're not going to escape this time. Ashford's defiant gaze softened slightly as he realized the battle was truly over. You think you've won? You think this is the end? You don't know who I am, what I've built. Liam approached, his face hard but resolute. We know exactly who you are, Ashford. You're a man who thought he could control everything, but you couldn't even control yourself. Atlas is over, And you're done? Clara stood by Liam's side, still shaking, but relieved. You'll be held accountable for everything. Ashford sneered, but there was something hollow in his expression. His empire was crumbling, and he knew it. Outside, the ground continued to rumble as the building's structural integrity faltered. The last remnants of Atlas's control were collapsing. But there was no time to savor the victory. They had to get out, and they had to do it fast. With Ashford subdued and his plans ruined, the team hurried to the extraction point. The path was perilous, the buildings around them beginning to collapse, and the threat of more explosions loomed. The enemy was defeated, but the aftermath of Atlas's fall would still claim its toll. Liam glanced back at the facility as they neared the waiting helicopter. The once imposing structure now looked like a carcass, smoldering in the night. It had been a symbol of control and power, but now it was a crumbling monument to greed and hubris. "Clara," Liam said softly, catching her gaze. "You did it. You stopped him." Clara gave a weak smile, but there was exhaustion in her eyes. "We all did. We couldn't have done it without everyone here." As the helicopter lifted off into the night sky, the team looked out over the destruction below. It was over. Atlas was finished. Ashford had been defeated. And with that, the world was a step closer to healing. But Liam knew that the aftermath would be complicated. There were still questions to answer, new challenges to face. The fight wasn't truly over. It had only just begun. As the helicopter flew away, Liam received a notification on his tablet, an encrypted message. The code was from an unknown source. It read, "Atlas was just the beginning. You haven't seen the real threat yet." Liam stared at the encrypted message, his mind racing. He quickly glanced at Clara, who was seated beside him, her eyes still scanning the horizon, her thoughts far from the danger they had just narrowly escaped. Her face, usually so composed, now looked tired, exhausted from the countless battles they'd fought together. She hadn't even noticed the alert yet. "Clara," Liam said softly, his voice carrying a weight of unease. "I just got a message. It's encrypted. From an unknown source." Clara's brow furrowed as she turned toward him. "What did it say?" Liam's fingers hovered over the screen as he hesitated. The words still seemed almost too strange to believe. But there was no doubt about its implication. It says, "Atlas was just the beginning. You haven't seen the real threat yet." Clara's eyes widened, her body going rigid as she processed the words. Her breath caught in her throat. "That doesn't make any sense. Atlas was the threat. Ashford's dead, his organization is in ruins. Who could possibly?" But Liam was already shaking his head. "I don't know, but I think we've only scratched the surface. Whoever sent this message knew about Atlas, about us, and they're implying there's something worse coming." Priya, who had been sitting quietly, her thoughts clearly elsewhere, leaned forward. "If there's a bigger threat than Ashford, we need to find it before it finds us." Ethan glanced over at Liam. "Do you think it's a trap? Someone trying to draw us back in?" Liam considered this. It could be. Or it could be something we don't understand yet. But whatever it is, we can't afford to ignore it. "Agreed," Clara said, her voice steady, though there was a flicker of worry in her eyes. "We need to trace this message, find out who's behind it, and prepare. Ashford's legacy won't be the only danger we'll face." The helicopter's engines hummed steadily as they flew further from the Atlas compound, but the sense of relief from their victory was quickly fading. The weight of the unknown hung heavy in the air. The team's fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. Hours later, they were back at the safe house, a quiet, abandoned building just outside the city. The night was still, but the team couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Clara sat at a table in the corner of the room, her fingers flying over a laptop as she tried to decrypt the message further. Liam, pacing in the center of the room, was deep in thought. Every possibility ran through his mind. Was this another organization like Atlas, or was there something even more dangerous out there? He had seen firsthand how ruthless Ashford had been. Could someone worse exist? Priya was seated on the couch, her arms crossed, a grim expression on her face. "If we're dealing with something bigger than Atlas, we need to act fast. We can't let ourselves get caught off guard again." Ethan stood by the window, watching the streets below. "No one's coming. But we know someone is out there. We just don't know who. Clara suddenly looked up from her laptop, her face pale. I've traced the message. It's coming from a server in the Netherlands, but the address is almost untraceable. It's bouncing off several different locations. This isn't a simple hacker job. Liam walked over, looking over her shoulder. So it's someone with resources. Someone who doesn't want to be found. Clara nodded. Exactly. And they're still active. This could be the beginning of something much bigger. Later that evening, the team gathered to discuss their next move. With the Atlas collapse, they had thought their mission was complete. But this new threat loomed larger than ever. We need to head to Europe, Liam said, his tone final. We'll follow the trail, figure out who's behind this, and shut them down before they get any stronger. Priya met his gaze. And if they're stronger than we thought? Liam paused. The weight of her question hung in the air. Then we fight harder. As the team made preparations to leave for the Netherlands, Clara's phone buzzed. Another encrypted message appeared. This one even more cryptic than the last. You've been warned. Don't follow the trail. It's too dangerous. But if you do, remember, it's never the enemy you see that kills you. The air was thick with tension as the team geared up for their mission. They had no idea who was behind the cryptic messages, but one thing was clear. This new threat was not going to be easy to track down. The warnings in the latest message were chilling. Whoever was pulling the strings clearly didn't want them to get involved, which only made Liam more determined to press forward. Clara was still processing the second message. It's almost as if they want to scare us off, she said, her fingers dancing over her tablet. But they've made a mistake. The more they try to warn us, the more I want to find out who they are. Ethan stood by the door, checking his equipment. It's not the first time someone's tried to intimidate us. Ashford did the same thing. Remember his threats? You'll never stop me, that sort of thing. Priya's voice cut through the air with a sense of calm resolve. The difference is, Ashford was an egomaniac who thought he was untouchable. This feels different. Whoever sent that message isn't just talking. They're watching. Liam couldn't argue with that. The sense of being hunted, of having eyes constantly on them, was unsettling. But there was no turning back now. He knew that if they let fear dictate their next move, they would be no better than Ashford's followers. They had a job to finish, no matter how dangerous it was. We'll stick to the plan, Liam said, his voice firm. We head to the Netherlands, trace the source, and find out exactly who's behind this. And this time, we don't take any chances. Clara finally broke her silence. I've got the coordinates. The server is located in a small town just outside Amsterdam. It's a place that's barely on the map, which makes me think this is someone with resources. The kind of people who don't leave a trace unless they want you to follow the trail. Liam nodded. Exactly. If we can catch them off guard, we might be able to get ahead of this. No more waiting. Let's go. The flight to Amsterdam was uneventful, but Liam's mind was far from calm. As the plane descended toward the city, he glanced at his team. They were all ready, each of them determined to uncover the truth behind the mysterious threat. But Liam couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Upon landing, they made their way to the small town Clara had pinpointed. The streets were narrow, lined with cobblestone paths and old, charming buildings, giving the place an air of tranquility. Too much so. It felt almost too perfect, as if the peacefulness of the town was an illusion meant to keep them from noticing what lay beneath the surface. They checked into a nearby hotel and spent the night strategizing. The next morning, they would begin their investigation, but first, they needed information. And that was where Clara excelled. Sitting at the laptop, Clara worked tirelessly, scanning through local networks, trying to find any link to the mysterious server. It didn't take long before she found something. Got it, she said, a spark of excitement in her voice. There's a private data center about 20 minutes away. It's a legitimate facility on paper, but there's something strange about its ownership. It's connected to an offshore account in a tax haven, and the trail ends at a dead-end corporation. Sounds like we've found our target, Liam said. Let's move. The data center was located on the outskirts of town, tucked behind a line of trees. As they approached, they noticed the high fences, security cameras, and the unmarked vehicles parked outside. The place looked quiet on the surface, but it was clear that the people inside didn't want visitors. "All right," Liam said, motioning for the team to assemble. "We're not going in blind this time. We need to get the layout of the building first and make sure we know what we're dealing with." Marco, who had become the team's field expert in physical security, took the lead. "I'll scout ahead," he said. "Get eyes on the entrance, see if there's a way in." While Marco surveyed the area, the rest of the team gathered in a nearby alley, out of sight of the data center. Liam's mind kept circling back to the warning they had received. Don't follow the trail. It's too dangerous. If anything, the message had only increased their resolve. They were in too deep now to back out. If someone was pulling the strings, they needed to know who it was and why they had targeted them. Marco returned shortly, his face tense. "The perimeter is tight. Security's heavy, but there's a blind spot on the east side of the building. It's small, but we can get in." Priya checked her watch. "How long do we have before anyone notices us?" "Not long," Marco replied. "We've got a small window. We move fast, or we'll be detected." The team moved swiftly, slipping through the shadows and making their way to the east side of the building. They climbed over the fence and approached the back entrance. With Marco leading the way, they entered the building, carefully avoiding the security cameras. Inside, the air was cool, and the hum of servers filled the space. The walls were lined with rows upon rows of machines, each one silently processing data. Clara immediately got to work, pulling out a device that would allow her to access the network and download everything she could. Liam stood guard, his ears alert to every sound. He could feel the danger in the air. This wasn't just a simple data heist. They were walking right into the heart of something bigger. Suddenly, a door at the far end of the room creaked open, and a group of armed guards appeared. The team was caught off guard. As the guards raised their weapons, Liam's heart raced. There was no way out, at least, not the way they had come in. They were trapped in the data center, surrounded on all sides. "Everyone, get down!" Liam shouted. The team dove behind the nearest cover, and the sound of gunfire erupted. The mission had just become a fight for survival. The sound of gunfire echoed through the data center, a sharp contrast to the hum of the servers. Liam's heart pounded in his chest as he ducked behind a steel column, his mind racing for a plan. The guards were closing in, their boots heavy on the concrete floor, but there was no way they could take them all down without risking everything. "Clara, how long until you have that data?" Liam shouted, his voice urgent. Clara was crouched behind a nearby server rack, her fingers flying over her tablet as she worked. "I'm almost there," she replied, her voice steady but laced with tension. "Just a few more seconds." The team's breath was shallow, their bodies tense, as they waited for the inevitable confrontation. Ethan glanced over at Marco, who was crouched next to him, scanning the room. "We need to get out of here, or we're going to be sitting ducks." "I'm aware," Marco muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing. "There's an emergency exit, but it's on the other side of the building. We'll have to fight our way through." Liam's mind raced. If they could just hold off the guards long enough for Clara to get the information, they could make their escape. But that was a big if. They were outnumbered, and the odds weren't in their favor. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps grew louder. The guards were closing in, and Liam could feel the tension in the air thickening. He glanced at Clara once more. "You've got this, right?" Clara nodded without looking up from her tablet. "I'm in. Just a few more seconds to extract the data." As the guards reached the center of the room, Liam gave a sharp signal. "Now!" Gunshots rang out as the team moved into action. Marco and Priya fired first, covering their teammates as Liam and Ethan sprinted across the room, weaving between server racks for cover. The guards returned fire, but the team was faster, more coordinated. They had no choice but to keep moving. There was no time to hesitate. Liam reached the nearest server rack and took cover, his heart hammering in his chest. He could hear the sound of his teammates engaging with the enemy, the chaos and adrenaline coursing through him. They were holding their ground, but they wouldn't last forever. "Clara, get the data," Liam shouted, his voice hoarse. Clara didn't reply. She was fully focused, her eyes locked on the tablet, her fingers moving quickly. A few seconds passed, and then, finally, she looked up, her expression unreadable. "I've got it," she said, her voice tight with relief. "I've got everything." Liam exhaled in relief, but there was no time to celebrate. They still had to get out of there. "Move," Liam barked. "To the exit now." The team moved quickly, but the guards were relentless. They followed closely, closing the gap as Liam and his team made their way toward the emergency exit. The hallway ahead was dimly lit, but there was no turning back. They couldn't afford to stop. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves face to face with another group of guards. There was no time to think, just act. Liam drew his weapon and fired, hitting the lead guard in the shoulder. The others returned fire, but Ethan was already charging forward, taking cover behind a metal cabinet. Priya and Marco were close behind, picking off guards as they advanced. Liam's focus was razor-sharp. He needed to make sure they didn't get pinned down here. There were too many risks. As they moved down the hallway, the exit came into view, a metal door leading outside. "Almost there," Marco shouted, a flash of relief in his voice. But then the worst possible thing happened. An explosion rocked the building, and the sound of shattering glass filled the air. The door to the exit was blown open, and debris rained down. The blast sent the team tumbling to the floor, disoriented and stunned. Liam barely managed to keep his grip on his weapon as the chaos unfolded. He pushed himself to his feet, shaking off the daze. His ears rang, and his vision swam, but the need to survive pushed him forward. "Is everyone okay?" Liam shouted, his voice hoarse. Marco groaned as he picked himself up from the floor. "We're good, but that was too close." Clara was already up, her eyes wide with shock. "I didn't see that coming. Who set off the blast?" "Doesn't matter," Liam said, gritting his teeth. "We need to get out of here now." The team moved quickly, pushing past the wreckage and through the now exposed exit. They sprinted into the cold night air, hearts still pounding with adrenaline. But even as they ran, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was still ahead. They had the data, yes, but that explosion was no accident. Someone knew they were coming, and they had just sent a very clear message. "We know you're here." Outside, the cold wind whipped around them as they made their way toward the waiting vehicles. Clara quickly pulled up the data on her tablet, scanning through the files they had stolen. "What do we have?" Liam asked, his voice still filled with urgency. Clara's eyes darted over the screen. "There's a lot here, more than we expected. Whoever's behind this has deep connections. There are names, accounts, and something called Project Exodus. I don't know what it is, but it's big." Liam's mind raced. "Project Exodus? What's that?" Clara shook her head. "I don't know yet, but it's linked to global financial systems. Whoever's behind this isn't just some rogue group. They have a network that spans countries." Ethan clenched his fists. "This is bigger than we thought. We need to figure out who's pulling these strings before they can strike again." Liam looked back at the smoldering building. "We will. But we need to be careful. Whoever set that explosion clearly wants us dead. They won't stop until we're gone." As they piled into the vehicles, Liam's phone buzzed. A new message flashed on the screen, and his blood ran cold. "We know who you are. We know what you've done. This isn't over. The real game starts now." The words on Liam's phone screen were like a punch to the gut. His mind raced, but his heart beat louder, warning him of the danger that was closing in. The team had barely escaped with their lives, and now, the people they were up against were sending a clear message. This isn't over. "Liam, what's the message?" Clara asked, her eyes flicking to him from the front seat as they sped down the dark road. Liam's grip tightened on his phone as he read it again. "It's a threat. Whoever we're dealing with, they're not backing down. They know we have the data." Marco's voice came through the rearview mirror, tense but controlled. "So, we're back to square one, huh? After all that, they're just going to keep coming after us." Liam looked out the window, his mind working overtime. They couldn't afford to back down. If anything, the threat they just received was a signal that they were on the right path, but it also meant they were stepping into a more dangerous game. "We don't stop," Liam said, his voice low but resolute. "We have what we need. Now we need to figure out what Project Exodus is and why it's so important." Clara began typing furiously on her tablet. "I'm already looking into it." Whoever's behind this has deep connections, government, private sectors, even military contracts. But I can't pinpoint the exact nature of this project yet. We need to dig deeper. Ethan's jaw clenched. How much deeper can we go? We're already in over our heads, and if they're targeting us specifically now, we're going to have to outsmart them, Liam interrupted, his voice firm. The people behind this, they think they're untouchable. But we're not backing down. We find the people running Project Exodus, and we expose them. Once we have that, everything changes. The words felt like a challenge. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready for the fight. The team had come this far, and they weren't about to let fear stop them now. As dawn broke, the team gathered in their safe house, a secluded cabin far from the chaos of the city. The windows were drawn, and the only light came from Clara's tablet, which illuminated her focused face as she scrolled through lines of encrypted files. "I found something," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was quiet, but there was a sharp edge of excitement in it. "What is it?" Liam asked, his voice sharp with anticipation. Clara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she tapped a few more commands into the tablet, bringing up a series of documents, official-looking papers, charts, and project proposals. This is the heart of Project Exodus," she said, her voice trailing off in disbelief. "It's not just about money, power, or influence. It's about control." Liam's brow furrowed. Control? What kind of control? Clara highlighted a section of a confidential document. "It's a covert operation designed to manipulate global financial systems and government policy. This project involves setting up artificial economic crises, destabilizing governments, and then swooping in to save them, all under the guise of humanitarian aid and economic stability. The people behind this are using global events to manipulate economies, essentially creating a shadow government that controls the world from behind the scenes." Liam's stomach twisted. This was bigger than he'd imagined. Whoever had conceived this project was playing a game on a global scale, and they weren't going to stop until they had absolute power. "They want to control the world's economy from the shadows," Liam said, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "And they'll stop at nothing to keep their operation running." Priya leaned in, scanning the documents on the tablet. "If this is true, they have their hands in everything. Every government, every corporation. They could destabilize the world as we know it. We need to stop them before it's too late." Liam nodded. "We've already made ourselves a target by uncovering this. But now we have to make sure the world knows about it. This isn't just about us anymore. This is about saving everyone who's at risk." Ethan's voice was cold and determined. "We've been fighting this entire time, and it's only going to get worse from here. But we don't back down, right? We keep pushing until we bring these people down." Liam met his gaze, nodding in agreement. "Right. We take the fight to them. We make sure the world knows what they're planning." The team spent the next few days strategizing. They knew they couldn't just walk into the heart of the operation without a solid plan. If they were going to expose Project Exodus, they needed to go straight to the source. Clara dug deeper, finding more links between the project and high-level government officials, military contractors, and financial institutions. The deeper they went, the more terrifying the scope of Project Exodus became. These people had set the stage for economic warfare on a global scale, and they were willing to do whatever it took to see it through. But they weren't going to let that happen. After careful planning, the team decided that they would infiltrate the next major meeting of the project's financiers, a gathering that was being held in a secure, undisclosed location. Clara had tracked down the coordinates of the event, and the team began to prepare for their most dangerous move yet. The night of the meeting arrived. The team had gathered outside the location, a sprawling mansion tucked away in a remote, heavily guarded estate. As they approached, Liam couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This was their moment. If they could get inside, gather the necessary evidence, and expose the people behind Project Exodus, they could stop it for good. But the guards were everywhere, and the building was fortified. It wasn't going to be easy. Liam turned to his team. "Once we get in, we move fast. We need access to the central server and all the data we can get. We don't have much time." As they slipped into the shadows and made their way to the mansion, Liam knew one thing for certain. This was it. Their final move. As they approached the mansion's back entrance, the sound of approaching vehicles interrupted the stillness of the night. Liam's heart skipped a beat. They were running out of time, and the people behind Project Exodus were closing in. "Get ready," Liam whispered, his voice barely audible. "This is it." But as the vehicles pulled up, Liam's stomach dropped. A familiar figure stepped out from the shadows of the approaching convoy. It was someone they never expected to see again, someone they thought was long gone. Ashford.